Chapter 886. Look for him. The person who turned off the power switch said with a gloomy face as he walked into the reference room. As his voice fell, the people who came in with him scattered, looking for Jiang Hai's traces. Jiang Hai glanced at them. It was not difficult to escape, but the woman beside him, troublesome. Since there was no way to break in, he had to find a way to hide. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai pulled Lois Knightley up and slowly walked to the dark corner. When Jiang Hai came in, he had already seen this place. There were many large cardboard boxes here. It was a good place to hide. While these people were not paying attention, Jiang Hai quietly piled up a few boxes in the corner. Then he and Lois Knightley hid in it, holding her head to prevent her from suddenly jumping up. Jiang Hai looked at these people in front of him through the gap of the cardboard boxes. Just as Jiang Hai thought, these guys were not smart enough. They searched in circles and would not destroy the shelves here. This also made Jiang Hai relieved. Just as he relaxed a little, he suddenly felt that a certain indescribable part of him was exposed to the air. He looked down and found that it was Lois Knightley who was fiddling with it. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai almost shouted, but Lois Knightley raised her head and made a shushing gesture to Jiang Hai. Seeing her gesture, Jiang Hai could not make a sound. He could only ask her with his eyes, "What is she doing?" But Lois Knightley did not answer Jiang Hai. Instead, she lowered her head and put something indescribable into her mouth. Although her movements were very unfamiliar, with this exciting scene, Jiang Hai also felt that his brain was empty. But the current situation did not allow him to empty his mind. He could only endure the feeling from that side while observing the situation outside. No. After searching for about 5 minutes, a big man walked in front of the commander and said in a muffled voice. When the commander heard the big man's words, he pushed the big man away. His eagle-like eyes scanned the room, but he couldn't find Jiang Hai's whereabouts. "I know you're here, outsider. Let me introduce myself, I'm Doflamingo Campbell. I don't know why you're here, but for my own sake, for the sake of these people here, you're doomed to die. Come out now, I will give you a chance to become one of us. If I catch you, I will make you wish you were dead." Doflamingo Campbell shouted towards the reference room in front of him. Listening to his words, Jiang Hai could not help but curl his lips in disdain. This guy is really shameless. What's wrong with him? Why did he come here to be a lunatic instead of a normal person? Jiang Hai wasn't crazy to this extent. Seeing that no one answered him, Doflamingo Campbell shook his neck, waved his hand, and walked out of the reference room. His subordinates also followed him out. Seeing them leave, Jiang Hai also let out a sigh of relief. After confirming that they had left, Jiang Hai looked at Lois Knightley who was still working hard. "Hey, they've already left. What are you doing?" hiss. Looking at Lois Knightley, Jiang Hai whispered. However, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lois Knightley sped up. Jiang Hai felt the impact and stimulation just now. Unable to bear it, he relaxed his demands on himself. At this moment, Lois Knightley also stopped. After receiving all the gifts, she slowly raised her head and swallowed something. After cleaning up the places that Jiang Hai could not describe, she put it back where it should be. "Phew, you're too crazy. How could you do that at this moment?" Looking at Lois Knightley in front of him, Jiang Hai complained. Hearing his words, Lois Knightley raised her head with a smile. "I have no choice. If I don't do this, I'm afraid that you won't treat me as your own." Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Lois Knightley said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled bitterly. "You're actually not crazy at all, are you?" Looking at Lois Knightley in front of him, Jiang Hai summarized her situation along the way. Although she looked a little crazy, Jiang Hai's sixth sense kept telling him that she was not crazy. That depends on what you think. Even a normal person who is locked up here will go crazy. Shrugging, Lois Knightley said briskly. She didn't care what Jiang Hai said about her. "What do you mean?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai looked at her with some confusion. "The drugs here all have a nerve suppressive effect. In other words, it's quite harmful to the human brain. After people take it, they will forget the past. Not only memories, but even eating, sleeping, going to the toilet, and speaking will be forgotten. Those who have lived in the mental hospital for more than 10 years are basically in the same situation. There are also many such people here. They have forgotten language, forgotten themselves, no anger, no happiness, no sadness, no humanity. Looking at Jiang Hai, Lois Knightley gently tucked her hair behind her ear and said sadly, "Since you're not crazy, why did you come in?" Looking at Lois Knightley's clear eyes, Jiang Hai was very sure that she was really not crazy. But if she was not crazy, why did she come in? Haven't you read my information? If I don't come in, I'll die. Compared to dying outside, it's better to come in and live for 10 more years, isn't it? Looking at Jiang Hai, Lois Knightley said with a relaxed smile. Let's talk about you. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai originally didn't want to complicate matters, but it was fate that brought them together. Jiang Hai was too embarrassed to just leave when the time came. Under reasonable and legal circumstances, he was still willing to help this woman. As you know, my name is Lois Knightley. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lois Knightley slowly spoke. After all, she had been receiving treatment for a year. During this time, she had forgotten a lot of things, such as the brands she used to endorse, the advertising slogans, and even what she used to do. She was a little vague, but how she came in, she always remembered. According to her, she used to have a boyfriend, and the two of them had a good relationship. But a rich second generation took a fancy to her. She had to say that this world was far more melodramatic than she imagined. The rich second generation took a fancy to her and wanted to sleep with her, but she didn't agree. And this rich second generation was a pervert. He only liked to play with willing women. If the woman didn't want to, he wouldn't give up. He would force the woman to be willing. So he caught her boyfriend and used him to threaten her. But who knew that her boyfriend had practiced before? After breaking the rope, he beat up the rich second generation and then took Lois Knightley to escape from the warehouse. But at the critical moment, the rich second generation's bodyguards appeared and shot Lois Knightley's boyfriend to death. Seeing her boyfriend die tragically, Lois Knightley was indeed a little crazy at that time. At this time, Lois Knightley had already run out of the abandoned warehouse, and her boyfriend used the last of his strength to close the door of the warehouse. Coincidentally, there were a few barrels of unused diesel near the door of the warehouse. Then her boyfriend ignited them with a lighter, and the whole warehouse burned. Her boyfriend's bones were not left, and the rich second generation also died tragically in the fire. When the police and the fire brigade came, only Lois Knightley was here. At that time, she was indeed a little crazy. After being taken away, the rich second generation's father was extremely sad. He didn't agree that the murderer was dead. According to him, he wanted Lois Knightley to be buried with his son. So he listed the charges, found the best lawyer, and convicted Lois Knightley of murder and arson. The United States also had the death penalty. It was not as rumored that there was no death penalty. The United States once abolished the death penalty in 1967, but then the crime rate was high. So in 1976, the United States restored the death penalty again. At present, 33 states in the United States had the death penalty. Just like the brother of the protagonist in the TV series Prison Break, he would be sentenced to death. But basically, the sentencing standard of the death penalty was very high. Only major crimes such as smuggling, kidnapping, bank robbery, rape, child molestation, and other major crimes, such as intentional murder, would be sentenced to death. But this was obviously not a problem for the rich. If they said that Lois Knightley had committed murder and arson, then she had committed murder and arson. This was the privilege of the rich in the United States. However, the police were not stupid. After they knew that they could not do anything to the rich businessman, they told Louisa Knightley to pretend to be crazy. That way, there might be a chance to reverse the case in the future. Otherwise, she could only die. So she began to pretend to be crazy. But after the rich businessman knew about this, he was very angry. He used the power at hand to get her here. He wanted her to suffer a fate worse than death. After listening to Lois Knightley's words, Jiang Hai was a little angry at first, but then he thought that he seemed to be at the level of this rich businessman, so he didn't say anything. But although he was at the same level, it didn't mean that he wouldn't stand up for Lois Knightley. This woman had suffered a lot. Since Jiang Hai wanted to hide, as long as he went out, Moses Adams would probably have something to do again. Chapter 887. Why do I feel a little hot? Just as Jiang Hai and Louisa Knightley were talking to each other, Louisa Knightley suddenly said with some doubts. Upon hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned. Hot? She's already naked, what's there to feel hot about? Just as Jiang Hai was about to scold her for being mischievous, Jiang Hai suddenly felt a little hot and there was a burnt smell. Looking back, he didn't know when it started, but the reference room was already on fire. Although the fire wasn't big, Jiang Hai was still startled when he saw it. He instantly carried Louisa Knightley beside him and rushed out. Fire was indeed a powerful thing, but as long as one didn't stand in the fire for a long time, it was still possible to rush out directly. Jiang Hai had enough speed and strength. After carrying Louisa Knightley, Jiang Hai rushed out of the reference room in a flash. But when he rushed out, he found Doflamingo Campbell standing outside the reference room. Beside him were many fat guards and human-like creatures. Finally can't hold it in anymore? Hee, you guys are really naive. You think I won't know if you hide in there? Why can't you hide anymore? In fact, it's fine if you hide for a while longer because this room has an automatic fire extinguishing function. When the temperature in the room reaches 50 degrees, it will automatically extinguish the fire. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the man said with a sly smile. At this time, Jiang Hai also put down Isis Knightley. At the same time, he took off his clothes and put them on her body. He didn't want this woman to be seen by others. It didn't matter before, but now it's not okay. At the same time, he also turned his head and carefully looked at the man in front of him for the first time. This man didn't look short, about 1.95 meters, which was not much different from himself. He was a very typical American white man with short blonde hair sticking close to his scalp and a sharp and mean face. Although he was wearing a guard's uniform, he didn't wear ordinary leather shoes on his feet. Instead, he wore a pair of pointed leather shoes that only old ladies would wear. He stood in front of Jiang Hai with his legs apart and a smile on his face that made Jiang Hai feel disgusted. Phew, I don't want to have a conflict with you, but it doesn't mean that I don't dare to. If you continue to pretend that I don't exist, I will leave after I find the person I'm looking for. Looking at Doflamingo Campbell in front of him, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes and said with an unfriendly expression. He was just running away from a fight, but it didn't mean that he wouldn't fight. This guy was really courting death by forcing him like this. Then you go out, find the police, and let the police deal with us? Ha, you really have a good plan. Instead of letting you go out, it's better to let you stay here forever. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man directly interrupted Jiang Hai's words and then said to Jiang Hai with a crazy face. It seems that you are really crazy. Looking at this guy, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes and was ready to attack. It's not that I'm crazy, it's the world that's crazy. Ha, but then again, who are you looking for? After I assimilate you, maybe I will let you meet him. Looking at Jiang Hai, Doflamingo Campbell said with a smirk on his face. Bruce David, do you know him? Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai had to ask him. Of course I know him, he is now making the best use of everything. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, Doflamingo Campbell touched his chin and said with a look of approval. It seems that he really knows where Bruce David is. Since you know, that's great, as long as I catch you, it should be enough. Hearing Doflamingo Campbell's words, Jiang Hai also smiled softly. The next second, he took a step and rushed towards Doflamingo Campbell in front of him in an instant. But he had to admit that this guy had been prepared for Jiang Hai's trick. At the moment when Jiang Hai rushed over, he also retreated quickly, and those big men rushed towards Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai had to change his attack direction halfway. Now he didn't hold back at all. He went up and kicked one of the big men in the face. At the same time, he used the force to turn in the air and avoided the attack of another big man. Then, he whipped the other big man in the face. After the big man spun about 1,800 degrees in the air, he fell heavily to the ground. Seeing Jiang Hai deal with two people so quickly, ordinary people might be scared. But these people weren't ordinary people. Just like what Lois Knightley said, these guys couldn't be called human anymore because they didn't have human emotions. Although two of them were knocked down, the others still rushed over. Jiang Hai did not hold back. After landing, he kicked down one of the big men and dodged another one. Then, he bounced off the ground and flew up in an instant. He pressed the head of the person who attacked him from behind and directly hit his face with his knee. The huge impact, along with his teeth, sent him flying. After Jiang Hai landed, he turned his body, jumped up again, and hit the head of a big man with his elbow. Pull the electricity. Seeing that 4 of the 6 macho men on his side were crippled in the blink of an eye, Doflamingo Canber, who originally ran out of the battle circle, turned around and ran. At the same time, he roared loudly into the walkie-talkie. As his voice fell, the lights in the entire basement turned black again, but this could not stop Jiang Hai's attack. In fact, his goal was not just to use darkness to stop Jiang Hai. He had to admit that this guy was a genius. Seeing that Doflamingo Campbell was about to run, Jiang Hai also sped up his movements. In less than a few seconds, he defeated the remaining 2 people. Just as he was about to chase after Doflamingo, he was stopped by Lois Knightley. What's wrong? Looking at the anxious woman beside him, Jiang Hai asked her with some doubts. Fire, fire. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lois Knightley couldn't help but point to the reference room. Yes, it was on fire. Just like what she said just now, Doflamingo Campbell was a genius. He knew that with Jiang Hai's speed and strength, if he ran away directly, he would be dead. But if there was a fire here, would Jiang Hai save him? There was no electricity at this time, and there was no way to put out the fire. If Jiang Hai did not put out the fire and chased after him, the fire would get bigger. This was the basement, and there was no passage leading to the first floor. The legendary passage leading to the outside must be locked now. If Jiang Hai did not put out the fire, he might be burned alive. Of course, he would die too, but he wanted to die together with Jiang Hai. This person did not know that Jiang Hai could climb out of the elevator. However, Jiang Hai did not want this place to catch fire after he climbed out. There was no signal now, and he would not be able to explain himself no matter how many mouths he had. Therefore, even if Jiang Hai did not want to, he had to save this fire. Damn it! After cursing, Jiang Hai saw the fire hose in the distance. After opening it, he took out the fire extinguisher from it. After unplugging the switch, Jiang Hai rushed into the reference room. The fire was extinguished for almost 3 minutes. In this time, who knows where the guy went? When there was only some fire ash left in the reference room, Jiang Hai also came out with the fire hose. This guy is really ruthless. This is troublesome, how do we catch this guy? Muttering in a low voice, Jiang Hai said helplessly. Doflamingo Campbell must have gone to the laboratory. He's been living there for the past few days. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lois Knightley also said seriously. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also decided to catch this guy first. Let's go to the laboratory. Jiang Hai waved his hand and took Lois Knightley to the laboratory. But before going, they also went to the power supply room. There were still 3 big men there, but the second leader, Patrick Charles, was not there. Jiang Hai did not hold back this time. He directly killed 1 and injured 2 of the 3 guys. After all of them had no combat power, he threw them out of the power supply room and restarted the power supply. Then, Lois Knightley led the way and rushed to the laboratory. The underground here was really big and troublesome. After running for about 5 minutes, Jiang Hai ran to an isolated area. This was the laboratory, but before going in, Jiang Hai put Lois Knightley down. He had been carrying her all the way. Otherwise, with her speed, she was really too slow. I don't know what dangers we will encounter after going in. Don't come in. Go to the elevator and wait for me. Looking at Lois Knightley, Jiang Hai said to her seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lois Knightley also nodded seriously. She was not crazy. She knew that she would only be a burden to Jiang Hai here. Her job of guiding the way was over. She believed that Jiang Hai would come back to pick her up, so after watching Jiang Hai walk into the laboratory, she quickly ran to the elevator. Now she was an accomplice of Jiang Hai. If Jiang Hai won, it would be fine. If Jiang Hai lost, according to her estimation, she might appear in these guys' lunch tomorrow. This was not a joke, it was true. These crazy lunatics, you can't use reason, law, or humanity to restrain them because they don't have it at all. Chapter 888. Qi. With a sound, Jiang Hai walked towards the laboratory in front of him, and the door of the laboratory was opened. After opening it, what entered Jiang Hai's eyes was a pure white world. In Jiang Hai's eyes, almost the front part of the laboratory was completely white. The walls were white, the ground was white, the ceiling was white, even the tables and chairs in the room were white. The white light was swaying there, making it seem like the whole world was white. The only difference was the strong smell of blood in the room. Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai's vigilance reached the highest level. In his opinion, this should be the office of the laboratory because there were many desks here, almost 20 of them. It seemed that there were a lot of people in this laboratory before it was destroyed, but unfortunately, there was no one left. He slowly walked inside. After a few steps, he found that in the middle of 2 desks, there were a lot of broken limbs and a few heads, but in addition to these pieces, the main body had disappeared. Only dried blood was left on the ground. Jiang Hai frowned and slowly walked forward. After walking through the first area, Jiang Hai came to the second area. As Jiang Hai walked, the door opened again, allowing Jiang Hai to enter the second area. If the first area was the office area, then the second area should be the monitoring area. The second area was not big. It was about 100 square meters hall. In the middle of the hall, there was a hexagonal area. There were many chairs, one person facing one side, but at this time, there was nothing but a lot of blood. The computer was still on, and it was full of blood and other things. Jiang Hai glanced at the scene in front of him and unconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Although he was very sure that in this world, he was the only one who was different from the rest, but he still felt a little scared. Because the scene in front of him was similar to a scene in a movie. Jiang Hai was also very afraid that a zombie would suddenly appear and eat him. That would be embarrassing, although his consciousness told him that it was impossible. This monitoring room corresponded to 6 electronic sensors. In addition to the door of the laboratory that Jiang Hai just came in, there were 5 other doors. These 5 doors were respectively labeled as the observation room, the laboratory, the medicine room, the supply room, and the rest area. To be honest, Jiang Hai did not know where Doflamingo Campbell went, but it did not matter because he could check through the computer here. Don't forget, the computer here was also used for monitoring. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai walked to the hexagonal platform and was about to sit in front of the computer. Suddenly, Jiang Hai remembered Doflamingo Campbell's trick. He stopped and looked back. Sure enough, he found a needle on the chair here. It seemed that this guy was really strange. Jiang Hai thought that it might be a mistake not to close this place when he left, but now it seemed that this was a trap. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai did not sit on the chair, but directly squatted there. When he practiced martial arts with Bell and Qi Jia in the past, it was not that he did not have the horse stance. Now, it was not that he could not squat. Squatting in the horse stance, Jiang Hai began to check the current surveillance video. Sure enough, after the camera scanned, there was no one in the observation room, the medicine room, the supply room, and the rest area. Only the laboratory was occupied, but it was not very clear. But it did not matter, as long as he was sure that there was someone there. Walking to the door of the laboratory, Jiang Hai used his guard card to open the door of the laboratory, and then walked in. After walking into the laboratory, Jiang Hai found that the smell of blood here was even stronger. Many people were tied to the test bench in the distance at this time. Some had their stomachs cut open, and some had been dried. Jiang Hai did not know who these people were, but at this time, those who appeared here and died should not be patients. It could only be the original doctors, nurses, and researchers. Looking at this inhumane scene, Jiang Hai walked inside. After walking for about a few minutes, a person appeared in front of Jiang Hai. It was a person that Jiang Hai was very familiar with, Doflamingo Campbell. You must have been very shocked along the way. Looking at Jiang Hai, Doflamingo Campbell sat on a test bench and said to Jiang Hai with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also stopped, then looked back at the patients from all directions at this time. Jiang Hai has also seen the types of these patients: fat people more than 2 meters tall, people without skin all over their bodies. In an instant, Jiang Hai seemed to have fallen into the encirclement, but Jiang Hai did not care and looked at Doflamingo Campbell in front of him. But this is not shocking enough. For what they did to us, this is not enough. Aren't you curious about what experiments are done in the laboratory here? Looking at Jiang Hai's answer, Doflamingo Campbell shook his head and said to himself, I'm not interested in knowing. This time, Jiang Hai finally replied, but his words made Doflamingo Campbell curl his lips. Even if you're not interested, I have to tell you that this pharmaceutical company is actually a group of animals. They are experimenting on us. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Doflamingo Campbell said angrily. Then he talked about the company's situation. Jiang Hai introduced this prison before. It is a company's welfare psychiatric hospital. It is specially used to detain those mentally ill prisoners, and they don't charge money for it. Some people will say, isn't this doing a good deed? Hee, how many people in the world do good deeds? Of course, some of the philanthropists in the world are really doing charity. No, more than 80% of them have a purpose. For example, Bill Gates and others. Do you really think they can just donate the money? Donations are tax deductible. Some things are 1% tax deductible, and some things are 1% tax deductible. In other words, if you donate 100 million, you can pay 150 million in income tax, which is very tempting. Of course, this company is not strong enough to lose money and make money. The reason why they built a hospital here is mainly because they want to do experiments here. Of course, the California government also knows about this, but no one will speak for these patients who have committed murder, so the darkness here will continue. Look at these people, do you think they used to be like this? Don't be naive. These fat people used to be ordinary people. In order to test the effect of the weight loss medicine, they were forced to inject hormones into them. That's why they became like this. In order to prevent them from screaming during the experiment, they sewed their mouths shut. Those skinless people were made to test the medicine for skin diseases. Don't you think they should be killed? Looking at Jiang Hai, Doflamingo Campbell said while looking at Jiang Hai. He thinks that the people here deserve to die. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai glanced at the people around him, then blinked. What does this have to do with me? I'm sorry, I don't care if you're really crazy or not. I'm not here to avenge them. What you said has nothing to do with me. I'm not a saint, so whether they die or not has nothing to do with me. Whether you die or not has nothing to do with me. No matter how much trouble they cause, they can't bring trouble to a privileged class like me. There is darkness in this world, but I don't want to be a sun to dispel the darkness. Looking at Doflamingo Campbell in front of him, Jiang Hai waved his hand and said indifferently. He is not cold-blooded, but in his opinion, this really has nothing to do with him. How can he have so much sense of justice? Ha 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 ha. Well, your goal is to find Bruce David, right? I can tell you that he is now working in the kitchen in the hall on the first floor. He is the head chef. What we have been eating these days is the meat of the staff here. Ha ha ha, I'll tell you now, but the premise is that you have to be able to rush out. Looking at Jiang Hai, Doflamingo Campbell said with a crazy face. Although he was crazy, he was not stupid. He knew that talking to Jiang Hai was like playing the lute to a cow. This guy's silence towards others had reached its limit. He did not care about the lives of these people, including himself. So it was useless to say anything now. It was better to take action. This was the most important thing. As soon as his voice fell, Jiang Hai and those lunatics had already moved. This time, Jiang Hai would not be polite. Now that he knew Bruce David's whereabouts, and he had already taken care of so many laboratories along the way, he did not care if he had to take care of more. After jumping up and dodging the first wave of people, Jiang Hai came to the front of the laboratory table in a few steps. The laboratory was actually the same as the operating room. There were also many machines here, and there were also iron rods hanging on them. These were used to hang medicine bags. Jiang Hai was going to take action now. Naturally, he could not break the iron rods with his bare hands. Then, he gave a head-on blow to a dermatological patient who had rushed over and sent him flying. Looking at his sunken head, it was obvious that he had lost his ability to fight. But these things did not matter, because no one would pay attention to him at this time. Jiang Hai, who had smashed him away, was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. He killed his way into the encirclement of these people. For a moment, people were really scattered in all directions. Chapter 889. Doflamingo Campbell knew that Jiang Hai was strong, but he didn't know that Jiang Hai was this strong. His physical fitness was 8 times the limit of an ordinary person's body. Plus, he had learned Bo Shou Jitsu before. If Jiang Hai was a rich man, he would be a killing machine on the battlefield. If he was placed on an ancient battlefield, he would be a match for 10,000 people. It could be said that even if Xiang Yu or Lu Bu were reborn, they would still be no match for Jiang Hai. This was the reality. At this time, in Jiang Hai's eyes, these experimental subjects were like clay chickens and pottery dogs. He could deal with them however he wanted. Under the scattering of the staff, half of the hands that surrounded him were instantly sent flying. In less than a minute, only a third of them were left standing. If this had happened to an ordinary person, they would have collapsed long ago. However, these people were crazy. There was no fear in their eyes. Therefore, even though they knew that Jiang Hai was strong, they still rushed forward and were beaten down by Jiang Hai. Doflamingo Campbell was also afraid when he saw how strong Jiang Hai was. He wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape, but unfortunately, he was kicked back by Jiang Hai. If this guy went out now, who knew if he would cause more trouble for him? Jiang Hai didn't want any more accidents to happen. It was almost dawn. With this thought, Jiang Hai swung the stick even faster. In less than a minute, the remaining 1/3 of the test subjects followed in the footsteps of the people in front of them. They lay on the ground, unable to fight. Clang! Jiang Hai threw away the stick in his hand and looked at Doflamingo Campbell, who was still trying to crawl towards the door. He curled his lips and walked over. When Jiang Hai reached for him, the guy suddenly turned around and stabbed Jiang Hai with a needle in his hand. Jiang Hai didn't say anything and just kicked the guy's wrist. After breaking the guy's wrist, Jiang Hai pulled the guy's other hand and brought him to the test bench. Then, Jiang Hai directly pressed him there. Jiang Hai didn't say anything and just kicked the guy's wrist. "Kill me, kill me, kill me." Doflamingo Campbell kept shouting as he looked at Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai looked at him and didn't do anything. Instead, he patted his face. "I won't kill you. If I kill you, how will I explain what happened here? I have evidence here. I want to clear my name, so you just stay here and wait for the police to come." After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he tied all the belts on the test bench on Doflamingo Campbell's body. After he couldn't move at all, Jiang Hai walked straight out of the room. Ignoring Doflamingo Campbell's roar behind him, Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. The problem here was finally solved. Next, he had to deal with Bruce David. After leaving the laboratory, Jiang Hai walked to the elevator. When he arrived at the elevator, he found that Lois Knightley was already there waiting for him. Jiang Hai saw that she didn't say much. After entering the elevator again, he went to the first floor. Perhaps because of the stop just now, there weren't many mental patients on the first floor, and they weren't aggressive. They were all pretending to be doctors and nurses. Moreover, with Lois Knightley, an acquaintance, leading the way, no one came to trouble Jiang Hai. The two soon arrived at the dining room, but there was no one in the dining room at this time. After Jiang Hai and Lois Knightley passed through the dining room, they entered the kitchen. But as soon as they entered, Jiang Hai felt his stomach churning. Fortunately, he didn't eat lunch or dinner, or he would have vomited when he came in. The entire kitchen was now covered in blood. In the corner of the kitchen, there were many heads. These people's heads were obviously cut off not long ago. They all died with their eyes wide open with disbelief and disbelief. Their severed limbs were placed in the kitchen at this time. In the middle of the kitchen, there was a white-bearded man standing there dismembering a woman. Looking at his familiar knife skills, Jiang Hai was sure that he had done this more than once. Jiang Hai could still bear it at this time, but after Lois Knightley walked in, she couldn't bear it anymore. Don't forget that she also ate the food made in the kitchen these days. She instantly leaned against the door frame and vomited. It was really disgusting. What are you two doing in here? The kitchen is important. Get out. Hearing Lois Knightley vomiting, the bearded man also raised his head. When he saw the white coat on Lois Knightley, he frowned and scolded loudly. You're Bruce David? Looking at the person in front of him, he looked very similar to the photo in the information Jiang Hai found, so he couldn't help but ask him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man also raised his head. You're looking for me? Looking at Jiang Hai, Bruce David asked with some doubts. Hearing that he was Bruce David, Jiang Hai nodded, then took a few steps forward, kicked the man's knife away, and knocked him to the ground with a punch. In this situation, Jiang Hai couldn't ask him anything, so he pulled him out. After coming to the restaurant, Jiang Hai also closed the kitchen door. After there was no blood, no severed limbs, and no severed heads in front of him, Jiang Hai calmed down a little. He asked Lois Knightley to guard outside. Jiang Hai went to the sink next to the table and got a glass of water. This was originally for the staff to wash their hands after eating. Jiang Hai walked to Bruce David and poured the water on his head. The man woke up with a splash of water. You, what are you doing, you bastard, I'm going to eat you. As soon as he opened his eyes, Bruce David screamed loudly, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai didn't give him the opportunity to do so. He directly stepped on Bruce's mouth, kicking him so hard that he almost couldn't breathe. His face turned purple from suffocation. You, what are you doing? I'm just a chef. Although Bruce David used to be a soldier, after so many years of life, he had already worn away his military instincts. Now that he saw that Jiang Hai wasn't so easy to talk to, and he might not be able to beat him, he decisively admitted defeat and said helplessly to Jiang Hai. I have a question to ask you. As long as you answer it properly, I will let you go. Looking at Bruce David in front of him, Jiang Hai took a deep breath, and then said to him seriously. Hearing that Jiang Hai just has a question to ask him, Bruce David nodded immediately, indicating that he understood. Looking at his cowardice, it saved Jiang Hai a lot of trouble. Let me ask you, where did you see this badge? And the story of this thing, tell me from the beginning. Seeing that he was so cooperative, Jiang Hai didn't say much. He directly took out a piece of paper from his pocket, then pointed to the dragon-shaped badge on it and asked. This thing, how do you have this thing? Looking at this piece of paper, a trace of panic flashed in Bruce David's eyes, then he asked Jiang Hai in a low voice. In his opinion, this thing is really not simple. You have already published it, how do I know? Don't talk nonsense, just tell me. After glaring at Bruce David, Jiang Hai said to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's roar, Bruce David also raised his hand and then began to speak. The story starts in 1938. At that time, a German scientific research ship went to the South Pole, but at that time, no one cared. After all, the powerful countries would go to the South Pole for scientific research at that time. However, in 1945, when Germany was defeated, the Allies only found a charred corpse. At the same time, they discovered that many people in Germany had disappeared. No one knew if they died in the war, but the leader at the time, the Americans, felt that something was wrong. So in 1946, they went to the South Pole, nominally for scientific research, but in fact, they went to the South Pole to find the secret base of the Germans. After they went there, 3 of them died, and they didn't understand the scientific research, so they came back. Bruce David was on the ship at that time, but he was not an official crew member. After all, he was 18 years old, and that was 70 years ago. Now, he is 88 years old. In fact, Bruce David was only 5 years old. The reason why he went there was because his father was one of the commanders at that time. According to his memories and his father's memories, he knew some things. For example, they really found the German base. It was a plane that landed on a snowy mountain. 3 people died, and 6 people survived. It was these 6 people who found the base, and this badge was printed in the German base. But when the large force entered the base, they found that there was no one in the base. Not many people knew about this. Among them, the Minister of the Navy, Forrestal, suddenly went crazy in 1949, and then committed suicide in a mental hospital. What he said when he went crazy was that there was actually Aryan City under the South Pole. Listening to Bruce David's words, Jiang Hai also fell into contemplation. His consciousness told him that this was nonsense. But he knew about the dragon-shaped badge. If he didn't look at it, he would feel that he was not very transparent. Young man, I advise you not to try to go there easily, because it is really terrible. If you are not careful, you can really die there. And if you want to go, it is best to prepare now. In the South Pole, you can only survive outside in December, January, and February every year. Other than these 3 months, the South Pole is a forbidden area. Looking at Jiang Hai's hesitant eyes, Bruce David also said with a smile. It seems that he still remembers the South Pole. Chapter 890. Okay, you sit in the car and don't move. I'll call the police. Looking at Lois Knightley sitting in the passenger seat, Jiang Hai said seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lois Knightley also nodded, then put on Jiang Hai's coat, put on the hood, and laid down on the chair. Seeing that Lois Knightley was ready, Jiang Hai also pulled out the car key, got out of the car, and walked to the police station in front of him. After asking Bruce David about the dragon-shaped badge, Jiang Hai took Lois Knightley out of the asylum. After getting into his car, Jiang Hai rushed down the mountain. Of course, after getting a signal, he first called Chi Jia and the others who had been very anxious at home, telling them that he was safe and asking them to call Moses Adams to come over immediately. Also, it was estimated that their plan to enter the mountain would have to be pushed back a little because this was not a small matter. Then he drove directly to the town not far away. Outside the town's police station, Jiang Hai also parked the car. After talking to Lois Knightley, he walked into the police station. Hello, what's the matter? Seeing Jiang Hai walk into the police station, the police officer on duty at night also sat up and looked at Jiang Hai with some doubts. It was almost 5:00 at this time, which meant that the sky was already bright. Jiang Hai had seen the sun at 4:00 in Los Angeles, but this police officer was quite sleepy. There were only more than 500 people in this town, and no one would come to the police station at night. At least this was the first time he encountered it when he was on duty. Hello, my name is Jiang Hai. I have a manor in Winthrop. You should be able to find information about me on the internet. What I'm going to say next, you have to immediately report to the state police. Jiang Hai looked at the sleepy young man and said with a serious face. Hearing Jiang Hai's serious words, the police officer also looked at him seriously. Today, oh no, yesterday, I went to the Jushan Psychiatric Hospital on the mountain. A few days ago, because the signal tower was blown down, the prisoners and patients there have rebelled. They killed all the guards, doctors, and nurses and disguised themselves as these people. At the same time, they killed the guards, doctors, and nurses. And these days, they have been eating these people. It was not easy for me to escape. Here is the evidence, hurry up and call your boss. Looking at the policeman in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the police officer here was completely stunned. The news of lunatics attacking the mental hospital and eating people made him a little overwhelmed. It wasn't until Jiang Hai looked at him in a daze and knocked on the table in front of him that he finally reacted. Then he immediately picked up the phone and called the police chief of this town. The police chief, who was still asleep, was also shocked after hearing this news. He immediately called the state police. This is really big news. After Jiang Hai called the police, he went to the police station to sit and wait for the officials to arrive. In less than half an hour, all the police in the town were in place, and then 20 people went to seal the mountain. Then more than an hour later, the police in the city arrived. This time there were more than 100 people, and there was also an armed police force. Well, Jiang Hai didn't know what the American armed police were called, but the armed police in his home were the Maritime Patrol Team. After watching the video provided by Jiang Hai, the head of the armed police was also very surprised. Such an ugly thing naturally had to be covered up as soon as possible, so he also told Jiang Hai, hoping that he wouldn't easily reveal it to the media. But he also understood that such a big thing couldn't be covered up purely by covering it up. He could only hope that this matter would be solved within the police force. Jiang Hai didn't care about this, anyway. He didn't expect the exposure bonus to make money. Then, more than 100 heavily armed police attacked the mental hospital at 10:00 in the morning. After entering, they really saw everything that Jiang Hai said. At that time, almost all the police vomited, and the mental patients were quite obedient. A small number of them resisted, but in the face of these heavily armed police, their resistance was meaningless. Soon, the mental hospital was captured, and in the basement, they also found the mastermind, Doflamingo Campbell. The whole operation only went on for about 10 minutes, and the mental hospital was wiped out. But even so, it still alarmed the media. After the police finished the battle, when they went down the mountain, they found that the media had unknowingly surrounded the mountain. Seeing that the situation was not good, Jiang Hai, who came as a guide, disappeared into the crowd immediately, then got into his car and returned home with Louisa Knightley. He knew that he was breaking the law by taking Louisa Knightley away, but he had to do it because if he let her stay here, she might be beaten or something. And most importantly, if she went to a normal mental hospital, if Jiang Hai wanted to overturn her case, the rich man could kill her first. At that time, it would be useless even if Jiang Hai wanted to overturn the case for a dead person. Therefore, Jiang Hai still took Louisa Knightley away. Of course, he didn't take her away directly. When he left, he also called Moses Adams. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams said that he would fly to Los Angeles immediately. At the same time, he also pulled a line for Jiang Hai. After this incident, Jiang Hai would donate $1 million to the California Police Department. Of course, a donation was a donation, and now, Jiang Hai was protecting the witness. Of course, this matter was also notified to the bureau chief of this city. Otherwise, it would be difficult for them if they found that one person was missing when they counted. After everything was settled, Jiang Hai returned to Los Angeles. Louisa Knightley kept looking outside along the way. To be honest, she hadn't felt this kind of freedom for a long time. She was quite reluctant to leave everything outside. Looking at her, Jiang Hai also smiled. This world was indeed full of darkness. But this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai, but he could save a life. Jiang Hai also felt that he had done a good thing. Of course, Jiang Hai's good deed had nothing to do with her helping Jiang Hai that night. Jiang Hai was a gentleman. Yes, that was what he thought. He felt that he was quite noble and full of positive energy. Look at how saintly he was. He even saved a lunatic. This kind of great love was quite impressive. Driving, Jiang Hai soon returned to Beverly Hills in Los Angeles. After waiting there for a long time, Moses Adams came. After he came, he officially took over Louisa Knightley's case, and Jiang Hai and the others were also preparing to enter the mountain tomorrow. However, Before leaving, Moses Adams pulled Jiang Hai to the side. "Boss, when did you come to Los Angeles?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams asked with some doubts. To be honest, he didn't know when Jiang Hai came to Los Angeles. "Why did he come here?" "I've been here for a few days." "Why? Is there any trouble with Louisa Knightley's case?" Looking at Moses Adams, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. If the problem could be solved with money, it didn't matter, but if it couldn't be solved with money, it would be troublesome. "No, this case is full of doubts, and I've also checked our opponent. He's just a small nouveau riche. He has some connections with the California consortium, but he's just a pawn. No one will go against a billionaire like you. I'm asking you this to ask, since you came to Los Angeles, didn't you go to Google to get your shares certified?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams waved his hand. Jiang Hai was the superior. He just needed to tell them what to do, and then Moses Adams and the others would solve the problem for Jiang Hai. They also had to find out who Jiang Hai's opponent was. The person who framed Louisa Knightley was a giant in the eyes of ordinary people. His total assets were about $200 to $300 million, and he had some connections with the California consortium, one of the top 10 consortia in the United States. If an ordinary person provoked him, he would naturally die without a burial place, but Jiang Hai, it was called crushing. So in Moses Adams' view, he could win Louisa Knightley's case without spending $500,000. He was so confident because his connections at this time were no longer comparable to a guy with only $100 or $200 million, even if this was the opponent's home ground. Moreover, Jiang Hai was never a person who would let the horse run and not let the horse eat grass. For this case, he had spent $1 million to ensure that Louisa Knightley would not be caught. Now, the money he gave Moses Adams was $2 million. That was to say, if it was settled within $2 million, the rest would be his. How much could be saved was up to Moses Adams' ability. What Moses Adams cared about was Jiang Hai's social status. Certified equity? Hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai touched his chin. This was also a problem. "Wait for me to come back. My matters here are more urgent." After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams. His matters here were indeed more urgent. After he finished visiting the Native American territory, he would go to Silicon Valley for certification when he came back. At that time, Moses Adams would probably be almost done with Louisa Knightley's matter. Of course, it was not as easy to fight a company as one imagined, but it was not so difficult with money to pave the way. Chapter 891. The following is a piece of news. Yesterday, a source said that a horrifying incident happened in California's largest psychiatric welfare center, Jushan Psychiatric Hospital. Yeah, Tony, after I heard about this incident, I didn't dare to close my eyes at night. Oh my God, it's really a tragedy. Millie, I think so too. It said that on the night of XX, the signal tower of Jushan Mental Hospital was blown down by the wind. Then, the patients in the mental hospital started what they called an uprising. The top criminal is called Doflamingo Campbell. He used his knowledge of chemistry to easily concoct a powerful tranquilizer and carried out the crime in the hospital. When the police received the news, all the guards, doctors, and nurses in the hospital were killed. However, after the patients took over the hospital, they didn't leave. Instead, they pretended to be guards, doctors, and nurses. When the police attacked Jushan, they were still acting. Maybe in their eyes, they were the guards and medical staff here. Below are some images from the scene. Looking at a certain image flashing by on the TV, a young man with a target on his face grabbed the gun next to him and fired wildly. The sound of gunshots lasted for 15 times before disappearing, but the young man still kept pulling the trigger. Looking at the young man's appearance, the others in the room laughed, because this is not the first time the young man went crazy. In fact, this news had already been broadcasted yesterday. Today, it was just a rebroadcast. Unfortunately, another television was broken. However, to them, the television wasn't that important. Okay, calm down, you will have a chance to take revenge. At this time, a man wearing a cowboy hat walked gently to his side, patted him on the shoulder, then said to him with a smile, "Do I really have a chance?" Hearing this man's words, the young man sat back on the sofa decadently and said with a bitter smile. Hearing his words, the man wearing a cowboy hat smiled and patted him on the head. If you believe that you can take revenge, then even if the chance is small, you still have a chance. If you don't believe that you can take revenge, then even if he is standing in front of you, you have no chance. Hearing the cowboy hat's words, the young man took a deep breath and nodded seriously. His fighting spirit returned to him. I've received news that Jiang Hai and the others have already left Beverly Hills. They're heading toward Nevada, but their destination is a little off. I don't know if they're going to Yosemite National Park or Death Valley National Park. At this moment, a man who had been sitting in the corner stood up and said with a serious face, "Look, isn't the opportunity here now?" Hearing the man's words, the man in the cowboy hat chuckled. His face flashed with a vicious expression. Everyone here had a grudge against Jiang Hai, including himself. Get ready. We're leaving in 5 minutes. After looking at the time, the man in the cowboy hat said seriously, then left the room first. The other people in the room also checked their equipment, guns, and ammunition at this time. 5 minutes later, 4 off-road vehicles drove out of this slum and sped in the direction where Jiang Hai and the others left. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't notice that in the sky not far behind him, a drone was flying there. If he knew, he would probably regret not bringing Chirpy. With Chirpy, the king of the sky, even a hairless drone would not be its opponent. But at this time, Jiang Hai didn't know this. He just sat in the car, listening to music while driving. Sitting next to him was Qi Jia, while little Huang and Xiao Bai were sitting in the back seat, looking at the scenery outside. From time to time, they stretched their heads out of the window and blew their tongues and mouths with the wind, blowing out a lot of saliva. In the middle of them, Wallace Shelley was holding a military GPS positioning system, studying the specific location. About 10 meters behind him, there was a car similar to Jiang Hai's car. Sitting in it were Azalina, Alfred Sala, Valentina Baralikia, Biliak, and Raylis Carter. The 5 women were also fully armed as they sat there, chewing gum, driving a car, or studying some gadgets. But don't underestimate these gadgets. In their hands, these gadgets could be used to kill people. Boss, the location has basically been determined. We have to pass through Yosemite National Park and enter the border between California and Nevada. There is a gobi there, behind is the Sierra Nevada forest, and ahead is the Nevada desert. I have to admit that we are lucky. Sitting in the car, Wallace Shelley looked at the GPS and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also chuckled. Those Americans are really too much. How can there be gold in that place where even birds don't shit? Hearing Wallace Shelley's words, Qi Jia also said with a face full of dissatisfaction. In her opinion, it's impossible for that place to have gold. Hey, don't say that. Although that place is not particularly rich in gold, the amount of gold produced is not small, but the output is a bit low, otherwise, it wouldn't be abandoned now. Hearing Qi Jia's words, Wallace Shelley also said with a smile. That area did produce gold in the past. But now everyone knows that the golden dream of California was actually deliberately promoted by the authorities. They wanted to develop the Western region, but it's impossible to develop the Western region just by relying on enthusiasm and so on. The development of the Western region is beneficial to the country and the people, but the people should say, what the F***ck is this? Well, they will be criticized for not having positive energy again. But this was the truth. People nowadays were so snobbish and greedy. They could work, endure hardships, and be tired, but they had to get a certain return. In the country, land belonged to the country. Maybe you planted trees here for decades, and it was not easy for the trees to grow. Then, the country took back the land. Who would you cry to when that happened? As for the development of the Western region in the United States, although the land in the United States basically belongs to whoever opened it, the central and eastern regions also had the same rule. Why would people go to the western region to develop? It's not worth it at all. Therefore, the American government began to spread the word that those who discovered gold mines and oil fields in the West had become rich overnight. Oil in Texas and gold in California, these two states developed in this way. But now you see, Texas is indeed still relying on oil, but mainly on animal husbandry, and California is relying on tourism. But you have to admit that the American government's policy was right. Moreover, they were not fooling these people. These people came to mine, and many of them found gold. This is not fake, it's just a matter of how much gold there is. The amount of gold stored in California may be ordinary for a country, but for an individual, it's definitely a huge amount of wealth. It's not like no one has ever mined gold before, so it's mainly dependent on one's own fate. It's similar to winning the lottery. Jiang Hai and the others drove quickly on the highway. At noon, they arrived in front of Yosemite National Park. Logically speaking, entering the park naturally requires a car search, but Jiang Hai specially made a note to avoid a car search. To be honest, Yosemite National Park is really small, only 1,100 square kilometers, and there are very few things in the park. Compared to the distant Death Valley, there is nothing here except for some green plants. The only thing worth seeing here is the subtropical coniferous forest. In Death Valley, other than a bare area, there are also saline alkali lands, sand dunes, volcanic craters, canyons, snowy mountains, and so on. So even in the tourist brochures, the recommended time to visit here is only 1 day, but Death Valley has 4 days. What kind of place is this in the eyes of the lazy Americans? This is a place to have a picnic. As for going to Nevada or the Sierra Nevada, don't be ridiculous. For Americans, there is nothing fun there. The Gobi Desert is really like what Chi Jia said, a place where even birds don't shit. Describing it as a barren place is a bit unfair. In the Gobi Desert in the northwest of the country, there are some buildings piled up with stones from time to time, but there is nothing here. After confirming the note, Jiang Hai and the others were able to enter the park without a car search. Then, they also took a break at the entrance of the park and bought some food. Of course, there is also a lot of food in their backpacks. Compressed biscuits, beef jerky, sausages, self-heating spaghetti, and so on, but those things are to be eaten after entering the mountain. Jiang Hai doesn't want to eat these now. After buying a bunch of hamburgers, hot dogs, corn cakes, and pizza at the entrance, Jiang Hai and the others rushed towards the interior of John Mitty National Park. On the other side, the people who had been using drones to determine Jiang Hai's itinerary also arrived in front of the park after an hour, but they don't have a note to enter, so they can only take a detour from a distance. If Jiang Hai's goal is in the park, then they are blind this time. However, it was a pity that Jiang Hai's goal was the Sierra Nevada. Therefore, even if these people circled around, they would still be able to find Jiang Hai's group. Naturally, Jiang Hai's group didn't know about this at this time. They were still heading towards the forest. Chapter 892. Follow us all the way. If you find anything, remember to come back and tell us. Jiang Hai patted little Huang and Xiao Bai on the head and said to them seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 2 dogs also stuck out their tongues, then lowered their heads and rushed into the forest. Seeing that the 2 dogs had disappeared, Jiang Hai and others also sat back in the car and studied their next route. To be honest, for Jiang Hai, looking at the map here, he was really a little confused. Where do we go next? Chi Jia picked up a hamburger and asked Jiang Hai while eating. I'm not very sure, but it should be the right way to go. Hearing Chi Jia's words, Wallace Shelley, who was sitting in the back and in charge of these things, also said with some uncertainty. Almost half a day has passed since they entered Yosemite National Corporation. A few hours ago, they had passed through Yosemite National Park and entered the Sierra Nevada. After crossing the Merced River, there wasn't much of a river in front of them. Let's drive slowly, we will find it eventually. If we can't find it, we will stay for the night. Anyway, we didn't plan to find it so easily. Jiang Hai listened to Wallace Shelley's uncertain words, but he didn't care. He just chuckled and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the others here also expressed their agreement. After talking to each other through the walkie-talkie, Jiang Hai and others also restarted the engine and drove along the rugged mountain road toward the Sierra Nevada. The road here was really bad. Oh sorry, Jiang Hai was wrong, there was no road here at all. Although the Mercedes-Benz AMG 65 was also a pretty good off-road vehicle, compared with his Shield, it was really a lot worse. So when Jiang Hai drove the car, it was still quite shaky. They kept driving through the forest all the way. The speed was definitely not fast enough. At this speed, they were not worried about losing little Huang and Xiao Bai. Finally, before night fell, Jiang Hai and the others left the forest area. However, the situation behind them was not too good either, because there were no trees in front of them. The Sierra Nevada was part of the western edge of the Cordillera Mountains in North America. Its main boundary was naturally in Nevada, but its western boundary was in California. It stretched 640 kilometers from north to south, and its highest peak, Mount Whitney, was 4,418 meters high. It was the tallest mountain in the United States. The eastern slope was steep, dry, and devoid of forests. The western slope was densely forested, and there were modern glaciers at the peak. The natural scenery was very good. What made this place famous all over the world was its hydraulic resources and gold mines. Jiang Hai and the others were now heading to the east. After leaving the forest, Jiang Hai and the others discovered that the further they walked, the more desolate it became. This wasn't an adjective, but a descriptive one. At this time, it was as if they were walking in the middle of a desert. There were very few grasses on the ground, and some mountains could be seen in the distance. There were also some faults in the surrounding rocks, showing the ancient traces of this place. Don't be surprised if you find some fossils here, because there were really a lot of fossils here, especially in the wild. As everyone knew, North America was the distribution center of dinosaur fossils. Of course, they were found all over the world. In the beginning, all the continents on Earth were merged into one, called Panga Continent. As time went by, the continents slowly moved and became the present world. Of course, dinosaurs were found everywhere. But compared to densely populated areas like Europe and Asia, where dinosaur fossils were more or less destroyed in ancient times, North America maintained its original lush environment, and the fossilized areas were well preserved. At the same time, for some dinosaur fans, North America, whether it was South America or North America, was a paradise for dinosaur fossils. Because the largest dinosaurs in the world lived in North America. For example, the familiar Tyrannosaurus rex lived in North America. The largest Seismosaurus lived in South America, including the Australopithecus and Carcharodontosaurus, whose complete bones were not found, lived in North America. The largest carnivorous dinosaur in Asia was the Tyrannosaurus rex, a medium-sized dinosaur. Jiang Hai also liked dinosaurs a long time ago, but that was when he was very young. Now, looking at the barren land in front of him, Jiang Hai didn't have any interest. Perhaps it was because there were too many stones here. Jiang Hai had seen that the water resources here were quite good. There were a lot of rivers, and there were fish in the rivers. There were also water plants in the rivers, but there was no grass on the land. He had to admit that it was very strange. It even reminded Jiang Hai of the Hell Gate he went to in the past. That place was also as desolate as this place, but it was even more desolate. There weren't even any mountains there. Here, there were some mountains and some scenery. However, other than the mountains, there really weren't many animal resources here. It was understandable. After all, there were too many humans living in this area. It was better in California, which was on the western slope. There were still herds of animals, and it was better in the south. The place where Jiang Hai and the others came from was a little panicked. Before coming, Jiang Hai had checked the animal situation here. Black bears were the most numerous species, but they basically lived on the west side. Stone goats were the second most common species, but they basically lived on the south side. Mountain lions were rarely seen, and grizzly bears lived alone. No one knew when they would be able to see them. The bird resources were quite rich, but they were basically on the west slope. Jiang Hai didn't see other American badgers, Canadian ferrets, red cats, mountain beavers, flying squirrels, fishing martens, wolverines, and so on. The only thing he saw were some birds flying in the sky from time to time, but Jiang Hai wasn't interested in these birds. As the sun gradually set, Jiang Hai and the others weren't in a hurry to travel. Instead, they found an open space. This open space wasn't far from the water. 2 cars surrounded the open space, and then Jiang Hai and the others lit a fire here and prepared to rest. Of course, they couldn't sleep outside. There were 2 cars. 1 could lie in the back row, and 2 could lie in the front row. In total, they could sleep 6 people. Jiang Hai and the others had a total of 8 people, and 2 people were on night watch. It was quite good. After setting up the fire, not long after, Little Huang and Xiao Bai came over with 2 rabbits in their mouths. Jiang Hai picked up the fishing rod he prepared and caught 2 fish. Maybe it was because the fish here lived too comfortably, or maybe they had never seen humans in their lives, so they weren't very vigilant. Jiang Hai dug up a few worms and hung them on the hook. Not long after, he caught 2 fish. The fish here were also quite famous. This place was rich in trout. Because this place didn't belong to the Great Lakes, and no one farmed here, the number of fish was quite good. Moreover, there were no Asian carps here, and they were all native fish in the United States. Jiang Hai also caught such fish. In addition to the 2 river trout, there was also a rainbow trout. Naturally, these 3 fish and 2 rabbits entered the stomachs of Jiang Hai and the others. Looking at these fish, Jiang Hai couldn't help but think of the Yangtze River grenadier fish, the large yellow croaker, and the Chinese bahaba fish that he raised. It would take some time for the Chinese bahaba fish to become a group, but the Yangtze River grenadier fish and the large yellow croaker fish grew quite fast. With the nourishment of Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, these fish could live for 3 years at most. He estimated that he could harvest a batch of them next year. While thinking about the manner, Jiang Hai and the others also chatted casually. Then they got into the car, leaving Jiang Hai and Layla Scarter to keep watch. Later in the night, Aller Sarah and Valentina would keep watch. In such a place, keeping watch at night was indispensable. As for tomorrow, they would just let them sleep a little longer. As everyone got into the car to sleep, Jiang Hai and Layla Scarter also chatted. This was the first time Jiang Hai and Layla Scarter talked alone, but it was nothing more than asking her if she lived well there and if she adapted to the current life. After all, something indescribable had happened between the 2 of them. So if they wanted to communicate, it wouldn't be awkward, and it wouldn't seem like they were trying to find something to talk about. Of course, in this cold wilderness, the 2 didn't do anything like using the sky as a blanket and the ground as a bed. Jiang Hai wasn't in a hurry, but they got together to warm themselves by the fire, chatting, and looking at the stars in the sky. Perhaps this was an unforgettable night for Layla Scarter. While they were chatting there, a drone was parked on a mountain in the distance. Through the drone's image, the group of people still hiding in the forest at this time also locked onto Jiang Hai's position. Relax. Relax, he's right there. He can't run away. If you go out now, you might not be able to kill him. After all, this is an open space, and his car seems to be better than ours. When he finds the location, not only can we block him inside and kill him, we can even make a fortune. You can go back and revive your father's casino, and you can also take revenge. Seeing Jiang Hai on the screen, the young man sitting in the front passenger seat clenched his hand unconsciously, but at this moment, someone patted him on the shoulder. He looked back and found that it was the man wearing the cowboy hat. He looked at the young man and said with a smile. Hearing what he said, the young man was relieved. He knew that the cowboy hat was right. Now was not the time for revenge. Not only did they want to kill Jiang Hai, but they also wanted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They lay in the car for a night. They were trackers, so they didn't dare to turn on the headlights or the ignition. They just stayed in the car for a night. The next day, after Jiang Hai and the others got back on the road, they dared to start the engine and follow Jiang Hai from afar. They must not appear in Jiang Hai's sight. They were professionals in doing these things. Chapter 893. Woof, woof, woof. With the harsh barking of a dog, Jiang Hai and his team, who were searching around, couldn't help but turn the steering wheel and rush toward the place where the dog barked. Not long after, in front of Jiang Hai, a collapsed cave appeared. This is it. Looking at the gravel outside the cave and the railway track that had been covered by grass, Wallace Shelley held the GPS and said excitedly. Hearing her words, the others also smiled. This was the third day since Jiang Hai and the others entered the wilderness. On the first day, they slept, and on the second day, it was already the fourth day since they set out, and on the third day since they entered the wilderness. In these 3 days, they could only roughly determine a radius of 10 kilometers. In other words, the mine was about 314 square kilometers in size. It was really not an easy task to find it, and this was achieved by using a lot of new technology. Wallace Shelley even hacked into the satellite to get the location, but even so, it took 3 days to find it. It was already 3:00 in the afternoon today, and it was thanks to Jiang Hai's 2 dogs that they found the location. As the 2 cars drove over, Little Huang and Xiao Bai had already appeared at the entrance of the cave. Looking at their anxious looks, Jiang Hai felt that there seemed to be something in this cave. After gesturing to everyone got out of the car with their weapons. Jiang Hai went to the front of the cave and looked inside. Jiang Hai couldn't help but stare. This was because what appeared here was a bear. However, it wasn't a big bear, but a small one. It looked like it was less than a year old, because of its fluffy appearance. It was quite cute. Jiang Hai used to read novels about farming at home. In those novels, the protagonists would raise a bear. However, Jiang Hai didn't want to raise a bear. So after seeing this little bear, his first thought was whether it was enough to eat. This is a North American grizzly bear, a protected animal, and it is still a cub. Accumulate some virtue. But unfortunately, Qi Jie seemed to see Jiang Hai's thoughts. After rolling her eyes at him, she walked to the front of the cave and looked at the little bear and said, "The North American grizzly bear is actually a kind of brown bear, but its hair is gray and it doesn't look so cute. The number of bears in the Sierra Nevada is not particularly small, second only to the number of black bears, but this is only the official statement." Jiang Hai only saw this one along the way. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai felt that he can't eat this bear meat. I don't know why this little guy appeared here. Such a big guy should be guarded by a mother bear. Looking at the little bear, Qi hesitated and said, but just after she finished speaking, a bear's roar came from the distance. Hearing the roar of the bear, Jiang Hai and the others also glanced back and found that not far away, there was an adult grizzly bear roaring there. It seems that this should be the mother bear. This mother bear must have eaten a loss from humans, or perhaps she knew about humans. Therefore, when she saw Jiang Hai and the others standing here, she didn't come forward. Instead, she stood in the distance and anxiously roared. Hearing his mother's voice, the little bear also started to roar. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai didn't want to kill more people, so he asked Little Huang and Xiao Bai to make way. Seeing that there was a path, the little bear in the cave hesitated for a moment and quickly ran out. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't stop it, it easily ran to the mother bear in the distance. Seeing that the child was fine, the mother bear over there also glanced at Jiang Hai and the others, then quickly left with the little bear. They knew that Jiang Hai and the others were kind enough to let them live. They can forget about this cave unless they wait for Jiang Hai and the others to leave. Seeing the 2 grizzly bears leave, Jiang Hai and the others also put down their guns. Drive the car over and block the entrance. You guys stay here first, I will go down with Biliak and Leilis to take a look. Seeing that the 2 bears had left, Jiang Hai looked at the people around him and said. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the women also nodded. Wallace Shelley and Qi Jie got into the car in the distance and drove it over, blocking the entrance of the cave. Jiang Hai and the others took their weapons, headlights, and some other things and walked into the cave. The cave was not very deep. They walked about 5 or 6 meters to the end. At the end, there was a pile of gravel. At this time, it was Jiang Hai's turn to work. Although it had been decades or even hundreds of years, Jiang Hai did not know exactly how long it had been. Stone was stone, and it would not grow back together. So Jiang Hai picked up a pick and dug out a lot of ore. After digging out the stone, Jiang Hai saw a hole that was probably big enough for a person to pass through, but at this time, the hole had been sealed with wooden boards. Looking inside, there was nothing but darkness. After Jiang Hai took a look, he directly tore down the wooden boards violently. Then he took out a light stick, polished it, and threw it in. As the light stick lit up, Jiang Hai also saw the situation inside the cave. This was indeed an abandoned mine. As the light stick lit up, there were many insects on the ground and walls. They all ran towards the dark place immediately. Jiang Hai took a look and saw that there were spider webs hanging on the side. It was similar to the ones seen in movies, but there were more insects. It was difficult for other things to crawl into the cracks of these stones, but it was not difficult for insects. Jiang Hai glanced at the insects inside and gave Lelis behind him a look. You don't know if these insects are poisonous or not. In the wild, the most deadly creatures are often not those lions, tigers, and the like, because people will be on guard against these things. Poisonous insects, poisonous snakes, and other things are the real deadly existences. With Jiang Hai's money order, Lelis also walked to the front of the cave. She took out a cylindrical gun behind her and stuffed a small ball into it. After the ball was shot out, it exploded about 20 meters in front of Jiang Hai and the others. In an instant, a thick yellow powder appeared in this small passage. Jiang Hai and the others had already put on their masks. They are not shooting a movie now, why do they have to care about their appearance? Safety is definitely the most important thing. As the powder floated, these insects also ran out of the cave crazily, but unfortunately, they couldn't run away. Jiang Hai had already lit a new light stick and threw it at the entrance of the cave. The flame burned all the insects that wanted to come out. The yellow powder was the insect repellent. Although it was somewhat against nature, for the sake of their lives, they had to do it. The fire lasted for about a few minutes, and the insects were basically gone. Jiang Hai was the first to step into the passage. He turned on his headlamp and the stun baton tied to his scar gun. The two lights swayed, and he walked in with the gun. He had to be careful. This was the most important thing. After walking for about 20 meters, Jiang Hai came to the end of the passage. Then, there was a huge hall. Jiang Hai used the light to shake it, but didn't find anything inside. So he waved his hand. Lei Lizi and Biliak, who were walking behind him, lit up their light sticks and threw them out. After throwing out a few light sticks, Jiang Hai thoroughly saw the situation in the hall. The hall looked a little old. There were some rotten wooden pillars around it. He didn't know how long they could last. In the middle of the hall, there were many carts, tools, and the like. There was also a generator, but it seemed like it couldn't work anymore. In addition, in the middle of the hall, there were many corpses. No, to be exact, it would be better to say that they were skeletons, because there wasn't even a little bit of flesh left. The torn clothes on their bodies, the fallen work around them, and the iron pickaxes stuck in their mouths told everyone that these people were probably killed. Looking at their clothes, these people should be the American supervisors who were killed. Under the light of the fire, the insects in the room were also shocked. Jiang Hai saw with his own eyes a large centipede about 30 centimeters long crawl out from the eye socket of a dead man. It turned around and hid somewhere. One more time. Seeing that there were so many insects, Jiang Hai didn't want to go down, so he said to Lei Lizi. Then Lei Lizi shot another insect repellent bullet. Then Jiang Hai ignited the flame and threw it at the entrance of the passage. Before long, the insects inside the passage were almost all gone. Then Jiang Hai continued to push forward. After passing through the hall, there was another passage. However, this passage wasn't as short as the previous one, it was small and short. The previous passage was mainly used to prevent people from sneaking in. Because of this, only one person could pass through at a time. But this passage was the one that led to the mine. Looking at the situation in front of him, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and then slowly walked into the mine. Following Jiang Hai, Lei Lizi was responsible for preparing things, and Biliak was responsible for looking behind. They slowly walked down step by step. At this time, on the distant plain, four off-road vehicles were madly driving towards Jiang Hai's direction. Something's wrong. Azalina, who was in charge of commanding this side, saw these SUVs rushing madly towards them. She immediately felt that something was wrong. She immediately ordered everyone to retreat into the cave. Azalina and Ailsara ran to the car, pulled out the car key, and picked up the weapons and food that they had already packed in their bags. After that, they retreated into the cave. Chapter 894. The car in front, stop. Looking at the cars rushing over, Azalina also shouted loudly, but unfortunately, the people in these cars had no intention of stopping. At the same time, they also saw that the people in these cars were fully armed. Bang! With Azalina's first shot, Alfred, Valentina, and Shirley pulled the triggers immediately. Although Qi Jia was a little scared, she also took out her Glock 18 for self-defense and fired at them. Unfortunately, these people's cars were also bulletproof, so the bullets were useless. Seeing this scene, Azalina was not in a hurry. While retreating into the cave, she took out a disc from her backpack. If someone saw this disc, they would not be surprised, because this thing has another name, landmine. As time came to the 21st century, all kinds of individual weapons also changed abnormally. There were all kinds of individual weapons. Although Azalina's strongest point was her body, she would not be polite to these external weapons, and they also had the ability to get these things. Although they were no longer part of that organization, at least they knew how to go to those shady places to get these weapons. So speaking of which, the weapons on their side were not inferior to those of the regular army. The disc she threw out was called a tactile anti-tank infantry mine. It was specially used to deal with the enemy's mechanized troops on the battlefield, and the way to open it was to crush them. And such an infantry mine could even blow up a tank, let alone some civilian off-road vehicles. Not good. Looking at the disc thrown over, the driver here had already reacted. He hurriedly turned the steering wheel to avoid it, but unfortunately, it was still a step too late. The disc flew directly under the left front wheel of the car, and with a loud bang, one of the cars was directly blown up. After spinning twice in the air, it fell to the ground, and the two people in the front seat fainted, but the two people in the back seat took this opportunity to open the door and escape. But as soon as they came out, Alfred, who was already prepared, screamed twice. The gun in Alfred's hand was not an ordinary gun, but a Soviet-made VS-94 sniper rifle. This was not an anti-material sniper rifle, just a general continuous fire sniper rifle. Because it had a silencer, its power might be insufficient, but it was very short, and its combat effectiveness at close range was quite explosive. Just like those cars just now, because the cars were bulletproof, the effect was not great, but after getting out of the car, even if these people wore bulletproof vests, it was useless, and they would die directly. Bastard, run over. The commander of one of the vehicles roared when he saw that he had lost a quarter of his men in an instant. Upon hearing his words, the remaining 3 vehicles immediately rammed into him. Bang! 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 The 3 cars directly hit the 2 cars, and the formation formed by the 2 cars was scattered. The originally intact defensive formation cracked in an instant, and this gap was fatal. Xiao Bai, Xiao Huang, go find Jiang Hai, the others retreat into the cave. After seeing this scene, Azalina, who was the commander, immediately gave the order without hesitation. Lil Yellow and Lil White went straight into the cave. Everyone also retreated into the cave at the first moment, and the people on the other side also directly got out of the 3 cars. Looking at the gap behind the cars, they suppressed like a storm. Although Qi Jia had undergone these days of training, her physical fitness was also not bad. But after all, she was not a serious soldier. She was half a beat slower and was hit by a bullet, but it was precisely because she knew that she could not do it that she wore the best bulletproof vest. Although this blow knocked her down, after being pulled into the cave, she only felt a little pain, but nothing serious happened. Go and see the people in that car. Seeing the women in front of them retreating into the cave, the people who got out of the car couldn't help but grit their teeth and said. Then 2 people went to the overturned car over there. The 2 people who were hit by the sniper rifle were already dead. Although they were wearing bulletproof vests, this shot was enough to kill them. There was a big bloody hole in their chest. If they were in the hospital at this time, they could still be saved, but unfortunately, they are not in the hospital, so they are doomed. As for the 2 people, they were only a little concussed by the air cushion. After being carried out of the car, they rested for a while and felt much better. Then they put on their helmets and came to the front of everyone. What should we do next? After jumping over the defense line of the 2 cars, these people came to the cave. Looking at the dark cave in front of them, a young man with a scar on his face asked a middle-aged man in the middle. What else can we do? Go in, but be careful. Hearing the young man's words, the middle-aged man also chuckled, then motioned 2 people to explore the way. After the 2 people followed the gesture, they directly put on 2 night vision goggles and slowly walked into the cave. But as soon as they walked in, they waved their hands and motioned the people behind them to stop. What's wrong? Seeing the movements of the 2 people, the leader couldn't help but ask with some worry. These bitches are really ruthless. They aren't afraid of blowing up the passage out. This short road is full of landmines. Hearing the words of the person behind them, the 2 people walking at the front couldn't help but whisper. Oh, they are really ruthless. Hearing the words of these 2 people, a macho man stepped forward, picked up a night vision goggles and looked into the cave. Sure enough, in the dark environment, several anti-infantry mines were buried in some pits at this time. If it weren't for their rich experience, they would have been completely annihilated when they came in. Is there a way to pass quickly? Looking at the things in the tunnel, the macho man asked the people behind him with a cold face. Leave it to me. Hearing the voice of the macho man, a person behind also said with a smile, then walked to the front of the cave. After the 2 people retreated, he took out a remote control car from his backpack. Boom, 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 boom. A series of noises sounded in this mine. At this time, Jiang Hai, who had gone deep into the mine, stood there with a pale face against the wall. He didn't encounter any ghosts. The mine below was normal. Except for a moldy smell, everything was normal. The reason why his face was pale now was because the explosion outside made the mine almost collapse. Leaning against the wall, Jiang Hai's face was quite pale. At this time, in the mine here, soil was constantly falling down, and the rotten wooden pillars felt like they would fall down at any time. Something must have happened above. After waiting for the noises above to stop, Jiang Hai and the others took a look at the mine in front of them and let out a long breath. Fortunately, they managed to hold on. At this time, Layla Scarter came to Jiang Hai's side and said worriedly. The explosion now told them that something must have happened. Azalina wouldn't casually throw mines for fun. Let's go back and meet them. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai was more concerned about the situation of these people than the gold below. What was money? He didn't care very much. If he could get it, he would get it. Even if he couldn't get it, he wouldn't be crazy enough to hurt the people around him for it. So now that he thought that something must have happened above, he wanted to go back and take a look. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Biliak and Layla Scarter agreed. Then, the 3 of them bent their waists and quickly rushed in the direction they came from. But before they ran to the entrance of the tunnel, 2 figures rushed in directly, startling the 3 of them. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's sixth sense told him that he was very familiar with these 2 things, so he didn't shoot. With a flash of headlights, Jiang Hai saw that the 2 people who came were none other than Xiao Bai and Xiao Huang. You guys came down, where are they? Half squatting on the ground, Jiang Hai touched the heads of the two big dogs and asked them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two big dogs also looked back, which let Jiang Hai know that they were behind him. Sure enough, after waiting for a while, the sound of footsteps came, and then Jiang Hai saw Valentina and Qi Jia running in first. When they saw Jiang Hai, the two were relieved. Then Wallace Shelley, Azalina, and Alfred also ran in. When they saw Jiang Hai, everyone was obviously relieved. What's the situation? Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. It's Izoatis, the person I didn't kill last time. I don't know which special squad he joined, or if it's a mercenary squad or something like that. The other party's equipment is very good. There are about 16 people in total, but now 2 of them are dead, so there are about 14 people left. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Valentina spoke first. Although she just glanced at them, she still recognized Izoatis's face. After all, that was the first stain on her life after she came to Jiang Hai. Who else is there? When he heard about Izoatis, Jiang Hai's first thought was that these people came to seek revenge. Everyone else is well equipped, except for a middle-aged man, wearing a cowboy hat. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina thought for a moment and said to Jiang Hai. Chapter 895. Lynch Walter, that guy isn't dead yet. Hearing Azalina's words, such a name popped up in Jiang Hai's mind instantly. In fact, this name was not too unfamiliar to Jiang Hai. After all, they had just had a conflict a few months ago. Lynch Walter hired a group of mercenaries to enter the village of Tarlac, looking for something. Needless to say, Jiang Hai knew that they were looking for this map. After being beaten back by Jiang Hai, it seems that these guys still haven't given up, but whether they give up or not has nothing to do with Jiang Hai. He didn't expect these guys to give up, but he didn't expect them to mix with Izoatis. It seems that more and more people want him dead, but do they think that they can kill him like this? Let's kill them first, then go in to look for the treasure. Jiang Hai glanced at Azalina and said decisively. No problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina smiled and said calmly. She didn't ask how they were going to defeat 14 people. She had a total of 7 people and 2 dogs. Oh, sorry, and Qi Jia, who was relying on her, but she didn't ask. It was just a matter of double the number of people, 3 times, 4 times, they had done it 10 years ago. You arrange it. Hearing Azalina say that there was no problem, Jiang Hai also nodded seriously. Now it's time to teach the professionals. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina looked at them, but then she heard the footsteps of the other party moving forward in the passage. She then gestured, indicating that they should deal with these people at the next place. Seeing her gesture, Jiang Hai also agreed immediately, then he came to the front and quickly ran into the depths of the passage, and the others followed him. As for Goldie and Xiao Bai, they opened the way for Jiang Hai in front. Azalina and Aleppo were in charge of bringing up the rear, and at the same time, clearing their footsteps. The speed of the group was extremely fast. However, the mercenaries who were afraid of Jiang Hai's ambush and were confident that they had trapped Jiang Hai's group here didn't know what Jiang Hai was thinking. They walked very slowly because they had tasted Jiang Hai's suffering before. Jiang Hai was so strong, and those women didn't look weak either. In such a situation, it wouldn't be wrong to be careful. After slowly walking out of the passage, they entered the first room. While they were searching the first room, Jiang Hai and the others had already arrived at the second room. This mine was indeed not big, but it was understandable. The great development of the western United States took place at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, which was the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century. At the very beginning, North America was the territory of the British, and the westward movement began very early. Slave owners in the South, land speculators and industrial capitalists in the North, usurers and ordinary people all hoped to obtain land in the West. At that time, the British government did what a world leader should do, and did not exterminate the Native Americans. Instead, they asked them to live in the west of Appalachia. In 1763, a bill was specially passed to prohibit immigrants from crossing the Appalachian Mountains to the west. The territory of the original British colonists, which was where Jiang Hai lived now, was not allowed to go to the west. Of course, it was not a big problem to go there, but at least most people did not dare to blatantly break the law. However, the American War of Independence, which they were most proud of, shattered all of this. In 1783, in the peace settlement agreed by Britain and the United States, the British opened up the Appalachian Mountains and a large piece of Native American land west to the Mississippi River to the United States. In 1850, the 7th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, who was regarded as an eternal enemy by the Native Americans, passed the Native American Immigration Act and even mobilized the army. This opened Pandora's box, and finally led to the extinction of the Native Americans. Although they were both natives, the Brazilians actually did very well. The men danced in the rubber plantations, and the women were busy having affairs with the white slave owners, and then the present Brazil was formed. However, the Native Americans were obviously very strong, and they would rather die than live on their knees. Therefore, the Native Americans were killed to extinction. Of course, if there was a choice, Jiang Hai would also be like the Native Americans, and not become a slave. It was just to show that the natives of Brazil were really not very brave. This mine was originally built by some people privately, and the living quarters were outside the mine, which had long disappeared over the years. In the mine, there were only these 2 rooms. One room was used to check if there was any hidden gold before being transported out, and the other room was used to store the mined gold ore. Of course, transporting gold ore would not make much money. They would also refine the ore here, and after removing the impurities, they would turn it into gold nuggets. This way, it would be easier to transport, and it would be easier to make money. The second room was where these things were stored. As Xiao Huang and Xiao Bai rushed into this room, Jiang Hai and the others also came. Compared to the dead people and insects in the first room, there were not many insects in this room. Moreover, even if there were many insects, Jiang Hai and the others did not have the leisure and time to care about these things. They immediately hid as per Azalina's request. After Azalina was busy at the door for a while, she also retreated far away. Then the whole room fell into absolute silence, and Jiang Hai also hid behind a shelf. Anyway, while waiting for these people to come, Jiang Hai also took a look at the room. The whole room was very big, almost 1,000 square meters. There were many tools hanging on the walls of these rooms, and in the middle of the room, there were many iron shelves. On the iron shelves, there were pieces of copper bricks. Looking at these stones, Jiang Hai took a piece and looked at it. As a result, he unexpectedly found that it looked like a gold nugget. Jiang Hai had found a lot of gold in the sea, so he was quite familiar with the appearance of gold. He weighed the gold nugget in his hand and found that it was almost a kilogram. At this time, at a glance, there were no less than 10,000 pieces of gold in this room. If there was no accident, this should be the treasure they were looking for. According to the recent gold price, an ounce of gold was about $1,270, which was $45 per gram, or about $290 per gram, which was about $40 cheaper than in China. But even so, 10,000 pieces of gold were worth $450 million. Moreover, with just a glance, Jiang Hai could tell that this was more than $10,000, not less. If there were 20,000 pieces of gold, it would be more than $900 million, which was in dollars. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little moved. These treasures were really easy to come by. There were no tombs, ghosts, or supernatural phenomena like he imagined. It was easier than going to the Jushan mental hospital. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai laughed self-deprecatingly. It seemed that he had been suffering from paranoia recently. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai continued to squat in place, waiting for the arrival of these people. However, these people were not stupid. They knew that there was definitely no other exit in this tunnel. What they had to do was to eliminate Jiang Hai and take out the treasures inside. That was all. So they moved very slowly. About 10 minutes later, Jiang Hai heard their footsteps. The first to come in were the 2 people wearing night vision goggles. As soon as they came in, they signaled everyone to not move. There is something in front of us. It might be a mine. Squatting on the ground and looking at the things in front of them, the two people in the lead said lightly. Hearing his words, the others immediately stepped back, and the two people wearing night vision goggles also squatted down, took out a folding riot shield from behind, and blocked the entrance of the tunnel. The anti-infantry mines were different from the anti-tank mines. After the anti-infantry mines exploded, they would release steel balls outwards. A large area would be hit, and the people who were hit would suffer a fate worse than death, so they had to guard against it. Then, the person who controlled the remote control car took out his own remote control car and drove it away in a wobbly manner. Not long after, the car scraped the steel wire tied to the anti-infantry mine and directly broke it. The anti-infantry mine instantly exploded. A large number of steel balls shot at these people's shields. Although the sound of the steel balls hitting the shields was very loud, it did not cause any threat. After the steel ball rain ended, these people slowly stood up, but their shields were still upright. They slowly walked into the room, but at this moment, another cylindrical grenade popped out directly from the ground. Not good, there is something else. Seeing this thing popping out, a voice shouted loudly. At the same time, these people also squatted down and hid behind the protective shield. As for Jiang Hai and the others, they closed their eyes at this time. Jiang Hai also covered the eyes of little Huang and Xiao Bai, because they knew that this was not a mine, but, not good, it's a flash bomb. The moment these people squatted down, the person who was wearing night vision goggles at the front saw clearly what it was and screamed. Then, the space was instantly filled with white as if it was daytime. And in this white, many people on the other side also screamed. It must be known that before this, they were in a state of darkness. They did not use headlights, but suddenly such a dazzling white light appeared. It would be strange if these people were not blind. Chapter 896. Ah. Along with the screams, Jiang Hai and others also closed their eyes and counted quietly. 1, 2, 3, as the 3 seconds ended, Jiang Hai and others opened their eyes in an instant. The dark world was still the same dark world. But they could see clearly that the other party was already covering their eyes and screaming. The first one to shoot was Al-Sara. She was using a sniper rifle. She went up and shot 2 people who were still wearing night vision goggles. As soon as the 2 people died, the shields in their hands fell powerlessly in the distance. At this moment, Jiang Hai, Azalina, Valentina, Beliak, Wallace Shelley, and Layla Scarter stood up at the same time, the weapons in their hands spurting out spears. They specifically aimed at the other party's face. There was no other way. These people were wearing bulletproof vests and helmets on their heads. If they didn't hit their faces, they wouldn't have a chance to hit them. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's level was not ordinary. After the first round of attack, 9 of these people had already left this world forever. Retreat, retreat. Hearing the continuous gunshots and the roar of his teammates before they died, the mercenary leader over there shouted for the first time, then regardless of his teary eyes, he wanted to run out crazily. It was really a miscalculation and they lost the whole game. The original team of 14 people had only 5 people left at this time. They ran crazily towards the outside, but the problem is, can they run away? At this moment, Goldie and Xiaobai also rushed out from Jiang Hai's side in an instant, rushed up and pounced on the 2 people who were covering the back, and directly bit the neck of the 2 people. The powerful bite force directly broke the cervical vertebrae of the 2 people. Now Jiang Hai's dog is at this level, and Jiang Hai and others quickly chased outside. Soon, in front of them, 2 heavily armed people, plus a cowboy hat, appeared in front of them. But at this time, they had already run through the last passage and were about to reach their car. Take care of them. Looking at these 3 people, Jiang Hai also said to Al-Sara. Then Al-Sara raised her gun directly, and with 3 screeching sounds, the right feet of these 3 people were instantly destroyed. Suddenly losing balance on the right side, the 3 people also fell to the ground at once. The cowboy hat man screamed and crawled towards the car in the distance, while the other two people turned their heads crazily, as if they were shooting at Jiang Hai's side. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai will not give them such a chance. Bang, 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 6 consecutive sounds. Jiang Hai's scar completed 2 waves of 3 shots, directly hitting the guns of these 2 people and making them fall in the distance. At the same time, their hands were also crippled. At this time, Jiang Hai and the others walked out. Azalina went over, took out the pistol on her leg, and aimed at the limbs of the cowboy hat who was still crawling, and shot 3 times. One of his limbs was already destroyed, then she dragged this dead man in front of Jiang Hai. Looking at the 3 people lying side by side in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and slowly squatted down. Actually, if you had been hiding, I might not have had a chance to find you, but you came here to seek death. I don't quite understand. Looking at the 3 people in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Jiang Hai had some impressions of these 3 people. Ezo Adis, the first time he saw him, he was still an arrogant underground racing emperor. Later, when he met him again, it was because he wanted to deal with Jiang Hai. Now, seeing him again, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai also knows the other 2 people. The cowboy hat man is the self-proclaimed explorer Lynch Walter, and the other person is the mercenary leader, Spartacus. No one knows his specific name, it's just his code name. Just as Jiang Hai said, if the 3 of them had been hiding, Jiang Hai might not have been able to find them, but they dared to come and find trouble with him. It's really like they didn't take the road to heaven and came to hell. Okay, I admit defeat. We lost. Tell me, what do you want to let us go? As long as we have it, we'll give it all to you. Looking at Jiang Hai, Lynch Walter endured the pain in his limbs and said helplessly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled disdainfully. Let them go? They didn't drink too much. What? Do you still want to kill them all? Hearing Jiang Hai's laughter, Lynch Walter asked with a surprised look on his face. When you attacked the Native American tribes, I didn't see you showing any mercy. Now you're telling me to kill them all? You Americans really have double standards. Since you surrendered, you have to treat them well. The lives of others have nothing to do with you, ha. Pointing a gun at Lynch Walter in front of him, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. He had never seen such a shameless person. You can't do this. It's illegal for you to kill us. Seeing that Jiang Hai was going to kill him, Lynch Walter said with a horrified face. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai just curled his lips. He is not a good person. Moreover, the Chinese say that if you don't remove the roots of the weeds, they will grow again when the spring breeze blows. So under Lynch Walter's horrified gaze, Jiang Hai pulled the trigger. In an instant, the .50 caliber Desert Eagle opened a big hole in the man's head. Lynch Walter died with his eyes wide open. Kill me, my father, and I will wait for you in hell. Looking at Jiang Hai, who turned his gun after killing Lynch Walter, Izzo Adis roared loudly. Hearing his roar, Jiang Hai also pulled the trigger. Then Spartacus, who didn't say a word, heard 3 gunshots, representing 3 lives that left this world. You guys deal with it, I'll take out the gold underground. Seeing that the 3 people were dead, Jiang Hai also put away his gun and said to Azalina. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina also ordered Wallace Shelley, Lalise Carter, Beliak, and Valentina to throw the bodies of the 3 people into their car in the distance. Of course, the bodies underground also needed to be dealt with. Jiang Hai took Alfred back to the underground space. At this time, only Qi Jia, Little Huang, and Xiao Bai were in the underground space. Although she was prepared, she still couldn't let go of killing people now, so Jiang Hai specifically asked her to wait for him here when he went out just now. Now that Jiang Hai was back, Qi Jia was relieved. As long as Jiang Hai was fine, it was the best. Then Jiang Hai and Qi Jia took the bags and began to put the gold bricks on the shelves. These gold bricks had been underground for 100 years and looked more like brass than gold, but Jiang Hai knew that it should be like this. Gold would also oxidize. If the gold was still shining, Jiang Hai would have to be careful because it might be a trap. A gold brick was about 1 kilogram. Jiang Hai and Qi Jia counted as they put it in. A large bag could hold 100 pieces. Jiang Hai and Qi Jia were not in a hurry and took their time to put it in. When they put in more than 20 bags, Azalina and the others also came back. Together, they helped Jiang Hai and the others put it in. When it was about 11:00 in the evening, Jiang Hai and the others had already put all the gold into the bags they brought. They were not in a hurry to ship it out today. It was already too late. They could rest for the night and ship it out tomorrow, but before that, they still needed to count it. There are a total of 132 bags of change. Here are 14 pieces, Qi Jia said with a smile as they walked out of the underground mine. At this time, only the 2 AMG 65s that had a hole in it were left outside. The other 4 cars, plus the blood stains and corpses, had all disappeared. Azalina and the others were quite good at doing this kind of professional work. They lit a fire and sat next to it. Jiang Hai and the others were eating dinner while Qi Jia calculated their income. 1 gold bar weighs 1 kilogram, which is 1 kilogram. 1 gram is about $45, so 1 bar is $45,000. That's $13,214 in total. That's... where's my phone? Hearing Qi Jia's number, Layla Scarter also began to calculate, but it was obvious that this Samoan's math results were not very good and she did not quite understand. A total of $594,630,000. Looking at the confused Layla Scarter in front of her, Wallace Lele said with a smile. Those in charge of information were indeed much smarter than those in charge of combat. Wow, boss, you're rich again. Hearing that there were nearly $600 million worth of gold bars, Valentina said with a smile. I'm not rich. It's not that I'm rich, it's that we're rich. I'll take out another $6 million to make $600 million. We'll give $100 million to the Tarak tribe. That's what they deserve. Of course, we can't give them money. We'll just give them things. As for the remaining $500 million, Azalina, you guys, plus Galina Vasilkaya and Duran who didn't come, there's a total of 8 people. Each of us gets $50 million. We'll split the $400 million, and the remaining $100 million is ours. In the past, the cows in his manor were fine because of his aura, so it was natural for him to make money. Now that they were out on an adventure, without these girls, he would not be able to eat these gold bars himself, so he would still share the money. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, except for Qi Jia, who still did not understand, the other girls were more or less touched. Then Azalina shook her head gently and threw a piece of wood into the fire. I don't want this money, Azalina said firmly as she looked at the fire in front of her. Chapter 897. Huh? What do you mean? Hearing Azalina's words, Jiang Hai looked at her with some doubts. Don't want, what does that mean? I'm by your side, and I have no place to spend money, let alone $50 million. It's meaningless. Shrugging her shoulders, Azalina said indifferently. Hearing Azalina's words, the others fell silent. Including Alez Sarah and the others, they also thought about it carefully. They received money from Jiang Hai every month, which was the so-called salary. There were 2 portions, one for Jiang Hai and one for the company. Their annual income was about $300,000. At the same time, Jiang Hai bought them a place to live and a car for Jiang Hai. They had a house, a car, a job, and a status. They also had an annual income of $300,000. They really didn't know where to spend the $50 million. For their own retirement? It seemed that Jiang Hai could provide for their retirement. What would they invest in? Except for killing people, they were really bad at business. In such a case, what was the use of the money? Originally, when Azalina didn't say it, they felt a little confused. Now that Azalina said it, they felt even more confused. People were selfish. If they were given money for free, they would naturally want it. But they really didn't know what to do with the money. They didn't have families to take care of, and they weren't luxury fans. Even if they were, they could afford it with their own money. Bags, minks, whatever they wanted, they could buy. If it wasn't enough, they could ask Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai would buy it for them. Now that Jiang Hai gave them $50 million, they really didn't know how to spend it. Moreover, these people were very smart. They knew that the $50 million was better than the benefits. Then I don't want it either. The first to react was the smartest Wallace Shelley. After the beauty finished speaking with a smile, she jumped to Jiang Hai's side. Her pair of extremely magnificent existence pressed on Jiang Hai's arm and looked at Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing Wallace Shelley's words, the others also shook their heads. As Azalina said, we have no use for the money. Looking at Jiang Hai, Alessara tilted her head and looked at him. Just now, when Jiang Hai didn't say anything about splitting the money, she didn't have this idea. Now that he said it, she also felt that the money in her hands seemed to be useless. That's right, I'll give it to you. After thinking for a moment, Valentina nodded and then said seriously. I don't care. Anyway, if I want to buy something, I'll just ask you for money. Biliak looked at Jiang Hai, shrugged, and said indifferently. In the end, although Layla Scarter didn't speak, the way she looked at Jiang Hai explained everything. After listening to their words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile helplessly. They were betting everything on him. Okay, I won't split the money with you. You can become shareholders of Ting Company. Each of you has 5% of the shares, which is a total of 40%. Looking at the girls in front of him, Jiang Hai also said seriously. Oh. That's fine, this time we are also shareholders. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls thought for a moment. This is not a bad idea. Although the total assets of Ting Company are about 1.3 billion now, and 400 million in exchange for 40% is definitely a loss for Jiang Hai, but as the saying goes, the meat is in the pot. Jiang Hai doesn't feel that he is losing money. I don't want my money, I also want to exchange for shares. I have shares in Qi's group, and I also want shares in Tinglong Company. At this time, Qi Jia also came over and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded with a smile. In order to not be unfair, Jiang Hai also gave Qi Jia 5% of the shares. In this way, 45% of the company's shares left Jiang Hai. But to put it bluntly, Jiang Hai is confident that he can keep them by his side, so these shares can't run away. Amidst the laughter, the ownership of Jiang Hai's pile of gold bricks finally came to an end. After waking up the next day, Jiang Hai and the others had breakfast and moved these gold bricks out. The space of this AMG 65 is not small, and it can barely fit under the chair. Anyway, Jiang Hai can't pull it all together, so it is inevitable that he will pull it back himself. 13 tons of gold was stuffed into the car by Jiang Hai. To be honest, it instantly felt that the space is quite small. Even the back of the seat is stuffed with gold bricks. If someone intercepts Jiang Hai's car at this time, then congratulations, you have won a big prize. When they came, the 5.5L V8 twin-turbo engine was quite powerful, but when they went back, it was difficult for the speed to exceed 30 miles per hour. There is no other way, it is really too heavy. Fortunately, the density of gold is not small. Therefore, it does not take up much space. Otherwise, Jiang Hai and the others would not be able to pull it, just like this, loaded with 13 tons of gold. Jiang Hai slowly drove into the distance. This time, they were preparing to go back the way they came. Although this place is closer to some cities in Nevada, there is a problem. Nevada is basically a desert, and the public security is not very good. Think about Las Vegas, Jiang Hai and the others should be careful. Although the public security in California is not particularly good, at least on the surface, no one dares to break the law, right? Jiang Hai drove. It took him 1 day to come here, 3 days to search, and 5 days to go back to Beverly Hills in Los Angeles. As soon as they got home and locked the car, Jiang Hai and the others all took a bath and took some antibiotics. Because they have been surviving in the wild these days, they did not know if they were bitten by insects or contracted any diseases, so it was normal to take some antibiotics. Then, Jiang Hai and the others all went back to their rooms, took off their clothes, and had a good sleep. Even Jiang Hai, who usually can't control his power, did not have any reaction when he saw them naked. They directly went to sleep. This time, they slept for 12 to 13 hours. After waking up, they felt pain and fatigue all over their bodies. Fortunately, they were very clear that this was normal. Then, when the women were thinking about what to eat, Jiang Hai began to look for a market. In fact, he had already found a market. The key was still with Du Feimin. As mentioned before, Dubai, which can also be said to be the Arab world, was a world of gold. No matter how poor a family is, they will inevitably have gold. When the bride gets married, if she doesn't wear gold all over her body, she will be criticized by her husband's family. Gold is very popular in Dubai because it is tax-free for the whole world. Therefore, 10% of the world's gold transactions are produced in Dubai. If Jiang Hai got other things, such as silver, it may be a little troublesome, but for gold, Du Feimin wants as much as he can get. However, he has been quite busy recently. After learning that Jiang Hai has gold, he only sent one person over. At the same time, he invited Jiang Hai to visit Dubai when he has time. Jiang Hai chuckled in response. He and Du Feimin have more business than friendship. If one of them really poured out his heart to the other, that would be crazy. Jiang Hai waited in Beverly Hills for 2 days. One of Du Feimin's housekeepers personally came to find Jiang Hai. After weighing them one by one, they determined the weight. After all, they were gold bricks from more than a year ago. Although they were almost the same as gold bricks now, they can be said to be 9 or 9. But it was impossible to be accurate to 4 nines, or even 5 nines. Basically, this was just pure gold, 99.9% of it. Therefore, the gold brought Jiang Hai a total of $593 million. Jiang Hai took the change. The gold was loaded into a car and sent directly to a plane. Du Feimin also directly transferred the money to Jiang Hai's account at American Express. In an instant, Jiang Hai's account was full again. After getting the money, Jiang Hai made a call to Tarak and told him to inform the patriarchs in the mountains that they had found what they needed. If they needed anything, he would just tell them directly. After Jiang Hai bought the items, he would send them over. If he gave them money directly, they wouldn't be able to buy anything and would be easily targeted. $100 million, Jiang Hai was fine with it, but that didn't mean that other people would be fine with it. Therefore, it is better to directly exchange it for things, such as some building materials, some animals, clothes, food, seeds, and so on. $100 million is enough for that small tribe to eat for 20 years. While Jiang Hai was arranging these things and leaving, Moses Adams, who was specially arranged to deal with Lois Knightley's case, had already made progress. It all depended on who had more connections and who had more money. So, Lois Knightley's case was quickly overturned, and the so-called rich man was forced to pay a lot of money. After Lois Knightley regained her freedom, she left Los Angeles. She didn't want to stay in this sad place. After thinking for a moment, Jiang Hai gave her a business card from the Tinglong Company. If she really had nowhere else to go, she could go there. In Jiang Hai's opinion, her appearance and brain were still very useful. If she really had nowhere to go, she could go to Jiang Hai's place. Jiang Hai could also shelter her. In the end, Lois Knightley didn't say whether she would go or not. She took the business card from Jiang Hai and left. Jiang Hai's matter in Los Angeles had officially come to an end. Although he really wanted to go to the South Pole and look for the place Bruce David mentioned, after all, the Dragon Badge was extremely important, he didn't have enough time recently. Chapter 898. Old Lu went to the toilet and met a young man. The young man took out his Dior and wanted to fight with Old Lu. Old Lou is gay and likes to fight with Dior. He forced the young man to squat in the corner. Let's see where you can run. Ding ding dang, ding ding dang. Well, that wasn't how the song was supposed to be sung, but who would care about that? It was December, and the entire United States was a world of red and green. This was because the United States and the West's biggest festival, Christmas, was about to be over. Among the major countries in the world, only Russia and some other countries celebrated the Eastern Orthodox Christmas. The rest celebrated December 25th. The traditions of the United States came from England and France. Naturally, they celebrated Christmas at this time. Jiang Hai had been in the United States for 3 years. For the people of this country, Jiang Hai had a deep understanding of the importance of Christmas. It was almost the same feeling as when Jiang Hai was young. However, in recent years, the atmosphere of the Spring Festival had become lighter and lighter. Almost everyone did not look forward to the Spring Festival like before. First, it was because their lives were better. It was not like before, when they could only have new clothes and delicious food during the Spring Festival. Jiang Hai's family was not very good, but it was not particularly bad either. When he was young, it was not like his parents' generation, where they could only eat meat or wear new clothes during the Spring Festival. He did not lack new clothes in the past, but the Spring Festival was always a fun thing, so everyone looked forward to it. Secondly, it was because his work was very busy now, and the pace of life was very fast. It was not like before, when he had enough time to wait for the Spring Festival. Other than the Spring Festival, there was nothing to look forward to. This was the reality. The Americans probably didn't celebrate Christmas the same way as the Chinese. This was because the Americans were used to being lazy during Christmas. Everyone had strict requirements for their working hours every day, and there were also many times when they could take a vacation. It could be said that in the United States, the time for vacation was much more than in China, especially in December. In order to welcome Christmas and the Spring Festival, many people saved their annual leave and took it at this time. They would be on leave for more than a month and would not go back to work until next year. Therefore, there were more people preparing for Christmas at home than before. The entire United States entered the Christmas atmosphere in advance. Jiang Hai often celebrated Christmas, but this was the first time he celebrated it in California. He was used to seeing Santa Claus who dressed up very well. Suddenly, he noticed that there were many Santa Claus on the street, Santa Claus girls who were wearing midriff-bearing outfits and miniskirts. Jiang Hai was really not used to it, but it seemed that the children and some young people were very used to it. Boss, did you hear what I said? Looking at Jiang Hai who had been staring outside, Moses Adams, who was sitting next to Jiang Hai, said helplessly. Upon hearing his words, Jiang Hai opened his mouth and smiled apologetically. Yes, he had been so focused on what was happening outside that he really did not understand what Moses Adams had said. Hey, boss, you're making me very distressed. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams helplessly flipped through the book in front of him, then sighed and said, but then he smiled. This is Jiang Hai, isn't it? Hey, isn't it just equity certification? What's there to study? I'll go and tell him that I'm one of your shareholders. I have no ambition. I just want the annual dividends. That's all. With a shrug, Jiang Hai patted Moses Adams on the shoulder and said indifferently. Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Moses Adams also shrugged. That's all he could do. Moses Adams knew very well how he got up. The reason why he had his current net worth was inseparable from Jiang Hai. So to a certain extent, he still has some loyalty to Jiang Hai. Of course, the loyalty of an American, and the loyalty of an American lawyer, is just that. If someone pays him to deal with Jiang Hai, he may not do it. But if one day, he has the ability to deal with Jiang Hai, then he may not necessarily not do it. This is not a matter of morality or not, this is the reality. Not everyone is like Jiang Hai, who has no ambition. The specific situation is like this, but boss, you have to pay attention to something. Don't show any weakness. If so, it will be troublesome. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams said with a serious face. Weakness? Jiang Hai really didn't listen carefully to Moses Adams' words just now. Now that he heard it, he was also a little puzzled. People like Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who are now in charge of Google, must be very sensitive to these things. There is an old Wuxia saying that the competition between masters is not about whose attack is stronger, but who has fewer loopholes. You must be careful of the traps they set for you. These things are very important. It is very likely that you will lose a lot of money. Looking at Jiang Hai's indifferent look, Moses Adams also said seriously. Okay, I will be careful. Looking at Moses Adams' serious face, Jiang Hai also nodded to show that he understood. He also knows that the business world is like a battlefield. There is no such thing as morality or kinship. He used to watch a lot of melodramatic TV dramas at home. Although they were all melodramatic, the material of the melodramatic TV dramas came from reality. Don't forget, there was a saying that reality was always more melodramatic than imagination. Especially virtual high-tech industries like the internet. In fact, many people in the industry are not optimistic about it. This was also the reason why those big families rarely bought shares of these things. This was because nobody knew when this thing would suddenly collapse. This kind of thing was very common. Just like Jiang Hai remembered, there was a time in the past when Renren was quite popular in China. At that time, it almost replaced Penguin, but suddenly, it seemed that in less than a year, no one played it. It was just that thorough, just that straightforward. Although he kept changing his name, there were not many people who played it. The same is true for the electronic information industry. It may be popular today, but it will suddenly collapse tomorrow. No one can say for sure. But the economic miracles brought about by these industries are quite impressive, and there are quite a lot of twists and turns in it. Speaking of the IT industry, the three giants of the IT industry in the United States, Microsoft, Apple, and Google, were also recognized. In the past, there may be IBM. Jiang Hai remembered that his laptop was the most expensive. There were also Cisco, Hewlett-Packard, DEC, and so on. Now, they are all gone. This is the reality. The founders of the three giants mentioned above, Microsoft, Apple, and Google, were all kicked out. But after they came back, only Google could keep their power so stable. Everyone knows that Bill Gates' words are not working well for a long time. Although he kept his shares, he has no management power. Apple's founder, Steve Jobs, was directly kicked out. Not only did he lose his company, but also his money. But with a clever mind, he later founded another company. When Apple was about to collapse, he bought Steve Jobs' company and let him come back to the head office to take over. Otherwise, Apple would still be a rotten apple and would not be the number one in the IT industry. Google's current chairman is not Sergey Brin or Larry Page, but Eric Schmidt. However, their words still carried the most weight. This showed that not only were the two men smart in business, but they also had some skills in business and politics. This allowed them to protect themselves in this whirlpool. In fact, everyone knows a little about Google. They started out as a search engine. They once wanted to enter Wuxia, but after being tricked by Baidu, they announced that they will never enter Wuxia. Their main businesses are very diverse. For example, the world's first video website, YouTube 13, belongs to them. They also have Google Maps. But because they are not allowed to enter China, they have not updated their maps for a long time. Seeing Apple's mobile phones becoming popular, Zhang Ruiqiang bought Motorola in 2012. In the end, Motorola's mobile phones are no longer sold. Their Android operating system is the most popular. It is ironic, later, they also launched e-commerce or something. The gimmick was to use drones to deliver goods. Regarding this, Jiang Hai just laughed. But last year, Google entered the spotlight again, mainly because of a game. A game that Jiang Hai was addicted to, Pokemon Go. When everyone is paying attention to VR, Google turned their attention to AR. Zhang Ruiqiang has to admit that these people are very creative and did a good job. The novel idea of going out of the house to play games is very interesting. They can train their bodies and play games at the same time. It is because of their ideas that they beat Microsoft and Apple to become the #1 company. To be honest, Jiang Hai is looking forward to seeing those people from Google. Because he is also interested in these high-tech things. He just doesn't know if Google has such things in their company. Soon, Zhang Ruiqiang's car arrived at Google's building in Mountain View, Santa Clara County. After Jiang Hai alighted from the car, Azalina and Alfred, who were driving, also alighted. They walked to both sides of Jiang Hai. At the same time, a middle-aged woman wearing an assistant walked out from Google's lobby with a smile on her face. She took the initiative to extend her hand. Chapter 899. Hello, you must be Mr. Jiang. My name is Shauna Boone, the senior CEO of Google's operations department, and I'm also the one who will receive you this time. Looking at Jiang Hai, the middle-aged woman in front of him spoke first and said with a serious face. Hello. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled and stretched out his hand. He didn't expect that when he came to the door, there would be a CEO or a chairman coming to pick him up. This was unrealistic. Although Jiang Hai now has some money and some reputation, he is still not at the same level as guys like Larry Page. Shall we go directly to the certification procedures, or do you want to visit our building first? Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to be quite easy to talk to, Shauna Boone also smiled and said, Let's visit the building first. To be honest, I'm quite interested in these high-tech companies. Jiang Hai looked at Shauna Boone in front of him and thought for a moment and said. He was telling the truth. It was not easy to come to Google, and he came as a shareholder. He naturally wanted to see the situation here first. Okay, please come this way. Smiling at Jiang Hai, Shauna Boone led Jiang Hai into Google's headquarters. Before walking into Google's headquarters, Jiang Hai was very satisfied with the environment here. In fact, it was called Google's headquarters, at least outside, it was more like a park. Lawns could be seen everywhere, and there were also sports venues such as volleyball courts. Because Google's headquarters was very large, there were places to rent bicycles outside, and the bicycles were all in Google colors. Android small robots were on many lawns, and there were all kinds of them. Because of the worship of high-tech, the parking lot here was equipped with charging stations. Don't get me wrong, it was not for charging battery cars, but for charging electric cars. This kind of car did not pollute the environment, and it was very cheap. Compared to burning oil, it saved 2/3 of the cost. Jiang Hai also had 2 electric cars at home, so he was very clear. And the most important thing was that if he bought this kind of car, the state would subsidize it, so it was very suitable. The only thing that was not suitable was that this kind of car could not go fast. Generally, it could rarely go more than 90 miles per hour, so those who pursued speed were not suitable for this kind of electric car. However, there were not many people in the IT industry who would play with excitement, right? Regardless of the situation outside, Jiang Hai followed Shauna Boone into Google's office building. From the outside, Google's office building was similar to some domestic government buildings, but it was not as tall as those government buildings. It looked like the highest place was about 3 or 4 floors, but after walking in, Jiang Hai wanted to curse. This evil capitalism really knew how to enjoy life. Walking into the building, the first thing that caught his eyes was naturally the front desk. This was nonsense, but it was not necessary to explain it here, because the front desk here was also very cute. Not far from the wooden front desk was a place for some people to rest. It was not the kind of sofa that everyone was familiar with, but soft cushions that looked like beans were placed in the distance. Google's office was not only an office, but also a scenic spot. Anyone who came to Mountain View City to play would more or less come here to take a look. Therefore, there were many tourists here. Walking inside, not long after, Jiang Hai saw a huge gym. There were dozens of treadmills, and at this time, some people were running there. The most important thing was that many treadmills were specially installed with boards, so people could exercise and work at the same time. This was also counted as working time. Next to the gym, there were several massage rooms in a row. If one sat in front of the computer for a long time, not only would it be easy to lose one's figure, but it would also be easy to get cervical spondylosis or old lumbar muscle damage. There were professional masseuses here. Of course, if one wanted to come for a massage, they would have to queue up. Walking forward, there was a small bowling alley. According to the map here, there was a huge laundry room in the distance, and there was a swimming pool on the roof. It could be said that the fitness equipment was quite good. When Jiang Hai walked past their staff lounge, he also found a billiard table. During the break, one could also play billiards. The staff cafeteria in the distance was self-service. It was said that there were more than a dozen dishes to choose from every year. Drinks, snacks, ice cream, and the like were free all year round. It was the same for the coffee machine. This was simply a paradise for foodies. Even between the two floors, there was a staircase to go upstairs and a slide to go downstairs. It maintained a sense of childlike innocence. Walking forward to the office area, it could be said that every employee's workspace was quite large. Walking forward, they arrived at the lunch break room. It was still morning, so there was no one here. However, Jiang Hai had to admit that the lunch break room here was quite impressive. There was a massage chair-like sofa that could only be found in the business cabin of an airplane. Lying on it, there was a fish tank on the opposite side. Looking at the swimming fish and sleeping here, it was really a very cool thing. Looking at what Jiang Hai had seen along the way, Shauna Boone also explained to Jiang Hai with a smile, "Here at Google, each area has a different theme. Some are modern, some are ice and snow, and some are deserts. The main purpose is to reduce the fatigue of the familiar environment and stimulate the brain to always maintain the state of youth." Indeed, people who always stay in a familiar environment will become dazed. Although it will make them feel very comfortable, familiar, and comfortable. However, if they always stay in a familiar environment, they will not think about what to do. Instead, they will do things based on their body's memory. For example, if they are familiar with the cup here, the cup will be here. They will not look for the cup, so their brain will not move. Jiang Hai actually lived in such a physical memory environment, but he felt quite comfortable and did not think about those messy things. In fact, it is a very happy thing. However, Google is not the same. Not everyone here is a billionaire. Therefore, Google needs to maintain the active thinking of the employees. An unchanging environment will stifle this. Therefore, basically, whether it is domestic or foreign high-tech companies, at least in terms of layout, it is absolutely enviable to everyone. Of course, this refers to those top IT companies. Ordinary programmers can't enjoy such treatment. Next is the place where Google has the most high-tech. Please follow me. After visiting the outside area, following Shauna Boone's words, Jiang Hai also came to a place guarded by security personnel. This place is not open to the public, but Jiang Hai is not an outsider after all. He is a shareholder here. Letting the shareholders see their black technology will help them to have confidence in their company. Shauna Boone is a veteran in this field. Therefore, after arriving here, she deliberately emphasized it. As she opened the door with a key card, Jiang Hai and the others walked in. However, when they went in, Jiang Hai and Moses Adams were fine, but when Azalina and Aleppo walked over, they heard a gunshot. Needless to say, it was because of the gun. After they handed the gun to the guard, the two continued to follow Jiang Hai in. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai really felt like he had entered Qi Jie's research institute. Not only because everything was white, but also because the high-tech here caught Jiang Hai's attention. In front of Jiang Hai, the first thing that appeared was a huge flat light screen. On this light screen, there was a three-dimensional pattern of this place made by a laser, including the safety exits, the various rooms, and so on. A person's hand could touch these rooms. For example, if Jiang Hai grabbed the pattern and turned it, the pattern would really turn. Whichever room Jiang Hai pointed at, that room would be enlarged, and then there was a video recording next to it, as well as an introduction to the room's function. Jiang Hai felt that he could play with this light screen for a whole day, and it might not be enough. This is a lightwave projector. Almost all high-tech companies have it. If you customize it, you can project the things that need to be processed in the computer into the air, just like in the Iron Man movie. It's a pretty good thing whether it's used to watch TV or play. It can also be connected to the home. If someone invades, it's very convenient. You can also control it to open the curtains, open the windows, and so on, but it needs to be fully remodeled. Seeing that Jiang Hai was very interested in the thing outside, Shauna Boone also said with a smile. Gulp, how much does it cost to modify this thing? Jiang Hai swallowed his saliva. It was almost written on his face that he really wanted this thing. He looked at Shauna Boone and asked her. We won't install it for outsiders, but because you are our shareholder, so, if you need it, we can install it for you for $10 million. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Shauna Boone also said with a smile. 10 million is fine. Let's not talk about anything else. I'll order this thing first. Just like you said, I want the feeling of Iron Man. Looking at Shauna Boone in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod. Although he sighed in his heart that it was really easy to make money from high-tech, seeing such a fun thing, if you don't let him play with it, he would feel bad in his heart, right? And as Alina and Alfred were also looking at this thing at this time, they also felt that it was really good to install this. No problem, I'll remember it. Let's go over here. Hearing that Jiang Hai had ordered a $10 million thing so happily, Shauna Boone was slightly stunned, then smiled and said, "This is really a rich man." Chapter 900. As for Jiang Hai, although he didn't hold a lot of shares, whether it was Larry Page or the board of directors, no one would look down on him, especially after all the trouble he had caused this year. Almost everyone in the world who knew about Jiang Hai knew that he was a man with great potential. The beef in his manor had almost reached 20% of the high-end restaurants in America. Only 1,000th of the beef that Jiang Hai sold to Sam's Club and C Merchant supermarkets were circulating in the market. The rest of the beef was sold out by the owners of high-end restaurants before it could even reach the shelves. People like Larry Page had tasted Jiang Hai's beef before. This year, Jiang Hai's seafood had also won a place in the high-end market in America. Although it was not as good as beef, its sweet taste was several times more expensive than ordinary seafood. Even so, those high-end restaurants still bought out all the seafood. In addition to the high-end Western restaurants in Boston, most of the other stores also received goods from Walmart. But after all, this was the second time he made a profit, so he had to spend more money. After knowing that Jiang Hai had his own logistics company, many people near New York started to buy Jiang Hai's seafood. In California, there were also restaurants that bought Jiang Hai's goods. Of course, it was through Walmart. It could not be helped. Everyone knew that seafood in the temperate zone was not as delicious as the seafood in the cold zone. This was inevitable. After all, fish in the temperate zone and the tropics could grow for 1 year and had a lot of food. On the other hand, fish in the cold zone could only grow for half a year and did not have a lot of food. Therefore, the fish in the cold zone needed 4 to 5 years to mature, while the fish in the tropics only needed 1 year to mature. If the taste of the fish in the cold zone was the same, then the cold zone would not be able to develop. Therefore, although the price was high, Jiang Hai's seafood still sold well in California and Miami. With the beef, fish, and shrimp, Jiang Hai could easily become one of the richest people in America. However, just when everyone thought that Jiang Hai could only do so much, Jiang Hai started to sell grass. Some people said that Jiang Hai was looking for trouble. Why was he selling grass? With the grass, he could raise more cows. By then, it would not be as simple as 20%. It might even be 50% or 100%. How much money would that be? Now that the grass had been sold, other people could sell a cow for $50,000 to $60,000. Wasn't that crazy? If it were 3 years ago, Jiang Hai might have thought the same. It was not that he had suddenly become a saint, or that his brain was damaged. Even if his brain was damaged, people like Chi Li and Moses Adams, who were very sensitive to business, would definitely tell Jiang Hai about this. The reason why he was selling grass was that he wanted to tie more people to his chariot. It was just like when Jiang Hai first came to America, he had been worried that his efforts would be swallowed up by the American government or some big family. At that time, his way of protecting himself was to buy oil futures. This was indeed a way. If someone irresistible came to annex Jiang Hai's manor, then Jiang Hai could go to the Rockefeller family. The billions of dollars in oil futures were a stepping stone. But even if he went to the Rockefeller family, the stepping stone was gone. Even if he could keep his manor, it was hard to guarantee that no one would ride roughshod over him. This was a realistic problem. After all, Jiang Hai at that time was just a fat sheep in their eyes. What Jiang Hai wants to do now is to not be under others. Although he has no ambition to establish a global village or a national strategic business, these things have nothing to do with him. But to ask him to be someone else's little brother, he won't be willing. That was why he chose to sell grass. Did anyone dare to touch him now? He was a strategic partner with the royal family in Dubai. In America, he was also a partner with real estate tycoons and Luke Sean. He was also a partner with South Korea. He was also from Wuxia. In Wuxia, the Qi family, which had tens of billions of yuan, was backing him. It could be said that Jiang Hai's allies were all over the world. Moreover, the taxes he paid were not a cent less. Whether it was the federal government or the state government, they all liked Jiang Hai very much. What reason did a law-abiding rich man have not to protect him? And the most important thing is that Jiang Hai himself is not involved in politics. He did not join any party. Under such circumstances, Jiang Hai naturally changed from a small manor that could be annexed to an existence that everyone wanted to have a good impression of. Of course, this was only one of the reasons. There was also another reason. That was, he did not dare to raise too many cows. His own family knew his own family's business. There was a secret about why his cows were so good. Although this secret could not be known by others and could not be imitated, if it was exposed, Jiang Hai would be in some trouble. People's hearts were hard to predict. This was the most important thing. You couldn't guarantee that all your subordinates would be on the same side as you, especially when there were too many people. You couldn't guarantee that there wouldn't be people from other forces among the newly recruited people who would cause trouble for you. Therefore, there was really no way to have too many people. You couldn't have too many people, and you couldn't have too many bulls, right? But even so, in the eyes of Larry Page and the others, Jiang Hai was still a rich investor. They had come here to watch Jiang Hai show off his strength. A system that cost $10 million had been booked just like that. This was strength. Bypassing the platform, Jiang Hai and the others walked into the laboratory at the back. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai could not help but exclaim in surprise. In front of him was a huge white space. However, every 100 square meters or so, there was a separate partition. Although there was no door, it told everyone that every space was researching different things. The first space that Jiang Hai saw was researching robots. Recently, Google's robots had been quite popular. The most famous one was AlphaGo. It had defeated professional Go players one after another, and it had attracted a lot of attention in the Go world. However, AlphaGo was just a set of data, and this professional team was going to load this data into the robots. In front of Jiang Hai, there were many simplified robots. Some of them looked like Eve in Robot Wars, and some looked like the robots in Robot Enemy. It was very simple. One could see the wires and so on at a glance. However, everyone knew that the most difficult part of this thing was the system, followed by the transmission device, and then the appearance. The appearance was also the simplest. Just think of the life-size dolls that were popular in Japan now, and you would find that it was very easy to make a shell. Seeing Jiang Hai and the others coming over, the robots that were researching turned their heads and glanced at Jiang Hai. When they saw Shauna Boone walking in front, they even saluted her. It looked cute and interesting. Next to the robots, there were a lot of people doing research. Some were studying drones, some were studying systems, and some were studying explosion-proof and so on. Jiang Hai didn't quite understand it. After Sean Brenna walked in here, he understood what she meant by each word, but when they were put together, he could only chuckle. Jiang Hai looked at Sean Brenna and said, huh. It was not that he did not study hard, but he did not know what she was talking about. As they walked, when they reached the middle section, Jiang Hai found an interesting partition. In this partition, everyone was wearing something that looked like a battle power detector in the Dragon Ball. They were gesturing there. Seeing this, Jiang Hai could not help but stop and look at the situation inside with some curiosity. This is the AR research department. We released a game called Pokemon Go this year. I don't know if you have played it. Looking at Jiang Hai, Shauna Boone said with a smile on her face. Of course, I am a die-hard fan, but isn't that game played on the mobile phone? And this thing that looks like a battle power detector in the Dragon Ball, what is it? Hearing Shauna Boone's words, Jiang Hai also nodded seriously. He liked that game very much. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Shauna Boone also explained to Jiang Hai. This is the next step of virtual reality enhancement equipment. That thing that looks like a detector is an advanced product of our Google Glass. It can not only display the image of the mobile phone, but it can also replace the mobile phone for voice control operations. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Shauna Boone walked into the space with Jiang Hai, picked up a device, and asked Jiang Hai to try it on. After Jiang Hai took it, he took a look at it first. This device is really almost the same as the detector in the Dragon Ball. It has a semi-membrane like a lens, and there is a device that buckles the ear, but it is very troublesome to put it on. It just needs to be plugged in. After Jiang Hai set up the device, a mobile phone icon appeared in front of his right eye. It was the same as the desktop of the mobile phone placed on the desktop at this time. Then under the guidance of Shauna Boone, Jiang Hai stared at the Pokemon Go icon. Open. As Jiang Hai's voice fell, the game started directly. After all, it was still in the experimental stage, so there was no animation or music. After seeing the progress bar read, a realistic picture appeared directly in front of Jiang Hai. On the ground beside him, there were 3 elves, looking at him with cute faces. Regarding these 3 little guys, Jiang Hai was very familiar with them. Little Charmander, Wonderful Frog, and Jenny Turtle. These 3 little guys were different from the ones he saw on the phone. Now, these 3 little guys looked as if they were really living in this world. Perfect. This office was actually not very big, and the arrangement was very simple. At this time, there was a black-haired white man sitting behind the desk. He did not look like an entrepreneur or a star, and he was dressed very well. When Jiang Hai looked at him, he felt that the first impression he gave was that he was a little cowardly, not in terms of personality, but in terms of appearance. It was a little too simple, and his thick eyebrows looked a little funny. But at this time, no one in the company dared to look down on him, because he was one of the founders of Google, Larry Page. Opposite him sat a middle-aged man who looked a little like Slavic. To be honest, this man was more handsome than Larry Page. He had a slightly gray beard and looked very sexy. Jiang Hai also knew this man. He was Larry Page's good friend, Sergey Brin. Jiang Hai did not expect to see these 2 people when he just came to verify shares. Hello, you must be Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang. I'm Larry Page, the CEO of Google. This is our shareholder, Sergey Brin. Seeing Jiang Hai come over, Larry Page immediately stood up and stretched out his hand with a smile. Jiang Hai also shook hands with these 2 people, and after a few words of greeting, he sat on a sofa opposite the desk. Naturally, only Jiang Hai, Larry Page, and Sergey Brin had the right to sit here. Although the United States did not pay attention to people's ranks, sometimes it was still necessary to distinguish between the priorities. Just like now, only these 3 people had the right to speak. So, whether it was Shauna Boone or Moses Adams, they stood by the side. As for Azalina and Alfred Sarah, they did not come in, but just stayed outside the door. Mr. Jiang, this time you are here to certify the shares, right? In addition to certifying the shares, Mr. Jiang, do you have any suggestions or ideas for our company? After sitting down and chatting for a while, Sergey Brin asked Jiang Hai with a smile. Compared to Larry Page, Sergey Brin is a Soviet Russian, so he spends most of his time abroad. For people like Jiang Hai, he knows very well how to talk to him. Well, I'm mainly here to certify the shares. As for other things, I have nothing to say. Hearing Sergey Brin's words, Jiang Hai's heart skipped a beat, but he still kept a smile on his face. He knew that something was coming. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai coughed softly and continued to talk to the two people in front of him about his intentions. I don't have any special ideas about Google, because I don't understand IT at all. I'm not afraid that you two will laugh at me. I'm originally a farm owner, and these shares were obtained by chance, so don't expect me to make any constructive suggestions. I don't have any at all. As for the distribution of my shares, I'm going to follow your wishes. After all, I'm just here to make money, that's all. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai explained his position first. Hearing that Jiang Hai was just talking business, the two of them were relieved. As long as he wasn't a fool or someone with ulterior motives, then they would be fine. Since he wasn't an enemy, then they could develop into friends, right? Hearing Mr. Jiang's words, I'm relieved. Just now, Shauna should have also taken Mr. Jiang around the company. I don't know how Mr. Jiang feels about our company's environment. Since Jiang Hai is not an enemy, Larry Page's tone was much more relaxed. He looked at Jiang Hai and said with a smile. It's quite good. To be honest, if I were a person in the IT industry, then my dream workplace would be here. And the black technology here is really a feast for my eyes. Although he didn't understand most of it, it didn't prevent Jiang Hai from praising them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two also laughed. Just now, Mr. Jiang also ordered a global intelligence system. Seeing that the three of them were having a good conversation, Shauna Boone also interrupted. Hearing that Jiang Hai was not being perfunctory and was really interested, the two raised their eyebrows. Although that system is a little more mature now, it's extremely expensive to build. Looking at Jiang Hai, Larry Page said in a low voice. To be honest, $10 million was not a small amount for anyone. Even if Larry Page's total assets were as high as $23 billion, it was not easy for him to come up with $10 million in cash. You may not know me well. Because I don't engage in listed companies, nor do I enclose land for construction, I spend all the money I earn myself. Perhaps in terms of total assets, I'm not ranked at all in this world. I may be ranked behind tens of millions of people, but in terms of cash, should be in the top 10,000. That's right. That's right. Looking at Larry Page, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Larry Page nodded secretly. He didn't know how much money Jiang Hai had in total, but thinking about it, with his business, he should have billions of dollars in cash. In this world, it was true that cash in the bank would only depreciate, but people with a lot of cash were the biggest customers. Of course, Jiang Hai's words about being in the top 10,000 or being in the top 10 million were all nonsense. There were indeed a lot of rich people in this world, especially those from big families. They were not listed, so no one knew how much money they had. But with Jiang Hai's current net worth, it was not a problem for him to be in the top 3,000 in the world. He thought that Jiang Hai was being modest. He heard that the people in the ancient Eastern countries were quite modest. But to be honest, Jiang Hai wasn't being modest. It was because his money didn't seem to be much in the country. Some sector-level cadres with real power probably had as much money as him, but of course, they had less cash than him. Looking at Jiang Hai, Larry Page thought for a moment, then said to Jiang Hai, since you're our shareholder, I'll make the decision. The original customer intelligence level is from beginner to advanced. Oh? This thing is divided into beginner and advanced? Hearing Larry Page's words, Jiang Hai asked with some confusion. Of course, the beginner level can basically only answer some simple conversations and settings, while the advanced level can't think on its own, but it can make connections through language. It's an intelligence system second only to AlphaGo. Looking at Jiang Hai, Larry Page also introduced it, and as soon as he finished speaking, Sergey Brin on the other side also spoke. I wonder if Mr. Jiang is interested in working with us to deepen our cooperation? Looking at Jiang Hai, Sergey Brin said seriously. What they liked the most was this kind of person who didn't care about anything and still had money. I'm not interested in other things, but I'm quite interested in AR. Hearing Sergey Brin's words, Jiang Hai chuckled. It was not that easy to trick him, but he was indeed interested in something. Chapter 902. Virtual Reality Augmentation Technology. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Larry Page and Sergey Brin couldn't help but look at each other. They saw a trace of surprise and enthusiasm in each other's eyes because no one knew better than them the significance of this technology. With all due respect, it seems that Mr. Jiang is not the kind of person who is interested in learning about the development of new technologies. Sergey Brin looked at Jiang Hai and thought for a moment before speaking. Although it was slightly offensive, it was on point. Through the conversation just now, they thought that they had understood Jiang Hai. Indeed, Jiang Hai acted like a pure layman. He also expressed that he was only interested in money and didn't understand anything else in the IT industry. He had almost labeled himself as someone who didn't understand anything. It wasn't that Larry Page or Sergey Brin looked down on such people. They had their own specializations, and they wouldn't be so shallow. They thought that because they were talented in this field, they would look down on others. They had already passed the era of ignorance. But in Jiang Hai's view, he was this kind of person. And this kind of person often only cared about short-term income. Their vision was not that strong, because they were not very clear about the future. Their short-term business plans were nothing more than the Android system, smartphone system, or even making a phone. These were all projects that could make money in a short period of time. Jiang Hai directly said that he wanted to cooperate on the AR project, which made Sergey Brin and Larry Page a little confused. Don't look at me like that, I really don't know much about these things, but I am a loyal fan of Pokemon Go. If you can sell this game to Wuxia, it will be even more popular. Looking at the two's eyes, Jiang Hai chuckled, then opened his mobile phone page and shook it gently. The pokeball on the screen was quite eye-catching. Seeing this scene, the two in front of him couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that their game worked. There's no other way, because this game requires Google Maps, but Wuxia doesn't allow maps that are too clear because there are a lot of pages that can't be logged in. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Larry Page also said with a smile. Indeed, since 10 years ago, Google had withdrawn from the Wuxia mainland. Firstly, it was because of some policies. As he said, there were too many military bases in Wuxia, and it was absolutely impossible for Google to be scanned by satellites. Of course, Google could say that they would bypass that place, but the government wouldn't know if they scanned it or not. You are an American company, and how can you be trusted by the Chinese military? Secondly, the regulation of the search engine was not in Wuxia, but in the United States. It was a bit troublesome to block some news. Finally, there was also Google adding fuel to the fire, which eventually led to Google giving up on Wuxia. And now this game required Google Maps, Google accounts, and email. Even if Google was willing to open it up, the domestic policies would never allow it. This was the reality, so if they wanted to play this game, they would have to wait. Okay, let's not talk about this. Speaking of which, I'm quite optimistic about this project, and I'm willing to make some money on it. I don't know what you think. He brought the topic back. Things like politics had nothing to do with him, and he didn't want to talk about these things, so it was better to see what they thought. Mr. Jiang, do you know about Alphabet? When Larry Page and Sergey Brin heard Jiang Hai's words, they looked at each other, then Larry Page spoke to Jiang Hai. I know a little. Isn't Google a subsidiary of this company? That's why I'm here to certify the shares. When Jiang Hai heard Larry Page's words, he nodded. He did know a little. Although he didn't know much, he knew a little. Well, Alphabet is a company that Sergey and I founded last year. I separated all the companies. Alphabet not only includes Google, but it also includes Google Ventures, Google Capital, Google Labs, Nest, and YouTube. I did this to completely separate business and scientific research. Larry Page looked at Jiang Hai in front of him and said seriously. Seeing how serious he was, Jiang Hai also became serious. I've always thought that business and research are different. A businessman in business shouldn't order the research and development department around, but there aren't many people who have such a long-term vision, so we had to break up the subsidiaries and force this to happen. I'm not only researching virtual reality augmentation technology, but also robot intelligence technology. I'm also researching flying cars, and I already have some preliminary ideas. Basically, the design is 70% complete. If you really have this idea, we can add you in. Larry Page looked at Jiang Hai and said seriously. But why me? To be honest, when you didn't say that just now, I was a little relieved. But after you mentioned the flying car, I'm very sure that if you had said that, you would definitely have invested a lot in it. Why me? Hearing what Larry Page said, Jiang Hai was stunned. It can be said that as long as the flying car is more than 70% complete, the number of people who will invest money can probably line up from here to Los Angeles. First of all, as I said, I don't want those shareholders who order me around. Second, I need cash, and you meet these two requirements. Of course, another reason is that I'm also a loyal fan of your beef. Larry Page looked at Jiang Hai and said with a smile. Larry and I go to Padarat restaurant at least twice a week. Oh, that's the only restaurant in Los Angeles that sells your beef. Seeing Jiang Hai's puzzled look, Sergey Brin said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh a little. Can this be considered a reason? But it doesn't matter, as long as they think it's a reason, it's fine, right? Okay, you've convinced me. Tell me, what do you want me to do? Jiang Hai looked at the two people in front of him and shrugged. He then asked them seriously. Jiang Hai was indeed a little tempted. There was no AR that Jiang Hai saw, no flying cars, no drone delivery. With only a search engine, advertising, and the copyright of the Android system, Google's net income last year was $487 billion. Based on Jiang Hai's 1.2% equity, he could receive $85,784,400 in dividends from Google last year. If AR was really put into production, flying cars, and even intelligent robots, it might take 3 to 5 years, or even 10 years. But by then, how much would Google's equity be worth? How much would Jiang Hai get every year? He was quite tempted. I've discussed with Sergey. Because of the company's restructuring, some shareholders are not willing to claim their shares. These shares add up to about 6% of the total. If you really have the funds, we can squeeze out 3% of the shares and give you 1% of the shares. Larry Page looked at Jiang Hai and said in a serious tone. How much? Hearing their words, Jiang Hai didn't have time to react. Instead, it was Moses Adams who let out a strange cry. 1%. After hearing his words, Larry Page said it again seriously. In his opinion, Moses Adams's reaction was right, and Jiang Hai's confused expression was not quite right. Currently, Google is delisted, and Alphabet is relisted as Google. The current market value of this company is 1%, you can do the math yourself. Looking at Larry Page in front of him, Moses Adams made an apologetic gesture, then pulled Jiang Hai over, quickly took out his phone, and handed it to Jiang Hai. At the same time, he whispered to Jiang Hai. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai also looked down. Okay, the current market value of Alphabet was $811 billion. 1% was $4 billion. Jiang Hai had 2%, and the remaining 88%, he had to fork out $8,011,936,800. Of course, even if he rounded it up, it was still $8 billion. It was $8 billion. How did these guys know he had so much money? Thinking back to a few days ago, after Du Feynman transferred money to Jiang Hai checked his balance. It was about $2 billion. Originally, there was nearly $8 billion in this card, but then Jiang Hai pretended to be 13 in imperial capital and spent $6 billion, which was about $2 billion, to buy 23% of Qi Group's shares. He still had about $6 billion left, and he earned about $600 million from selling gold, which added up to about $2 billion. But it had to be known that this money also had to be taxed. Although he would not be like last year, where he would spend hundreds of millions at once, he would not be able to save up. However, this amount of money couldn't be saved. After deducting next year's April tax, Jiang Hai didn't have much left. Well, he had always thought that buying a plane or something like that wouldn't be a problem. Now, it seemed that there might be some problems. Although he had already paid for the plane, if he really bought it, he might be back to square one in a single day. Looking at this number, to be honest, Jiang Hai was a little hesitant. Moses Adams quietly hinted to Jiang Hai that if he had the money, he could buy it if he wanted to. This was a very appropriate thing to do. Looking at his movement, Jiang Hai gritted his teeth. Based on his current monthly income, he could just sell more grass in April. The taxes would not be a problem for him. These shares, he wanted them. Chapter 903. What's wrong? Can't sleep? The moonlight shone on Beverly Hills, Jiang Hai's rented villa. Under the moonlight, Jiang Hai sat on the sofa in the living room, staring blankly at the moon outside. At this time, Azalina slowly walked over from behind. Her hands slowly slid from Jiang Hai's neck to Jiang Hai's chest. She looked at him with some doubt and asked. Sigh. I worked so hard for 2 to 3 years, and now I'm back to square one. I used all my assets to exchange for this piece of paper. Sigh. My heart hurts. Jiang Hai slapped his forehead and said helplessly when he sensed Azalina behind him. He spent $8 billion to buy 8% of Google's shares and merged it with his original 2% to become 1%. What's the point of exchanging $4 billion in cash for 1% of Google's shares? In fact, there are many benefits. From Moses Adams' point of view, Jiang Hai has made a lot of money. Google, Apple, and Microsoft shares are still not shares, and there is basically no place to buy them. They can't even be bought at a premium. Furthermore, Jiang Hai's shares are at par, and he saved some change. From Moses Adams' point of view, if Jiang Hai sells this 1% of Google's shares now, he can get at least $6 billion. To Moses Adams and the Americans, using $8 billion in cash to exchange for $6 billion in shares was a good deal, especially for a big company like Google. Moreover, this was not considered a waste of money. For example, Google's annual revenue is about $70 billion. Jiang Hai can earn $700 million a year from dividends. He can earn back $8 billion in about 7 years, and the rest is pure profit. Of course, if you include taxes, it will take more than 10 years to earn it back. The premise is that Google only earns $70 billion a year. If Google goes bankrupt tomorrow, Jiang Hai's money will go to waste. But judging from Google's current development, they will not let Jiang Hai's money go to waste. Another important point is that Jiang Hai is now a shareholder of Google's board of directors. In the past, Jiang Hai is at most a scattered shareholder. He does not have voting rights or speaking rights. The only thing he has is the right to get dividends. Now, with 1% of the shares, Jiang Hai can enter Google's board of directors. The composition of Google's shares is very complicated. Microsoft and Apple are even more complicated. Larry Page's shares are mostly non-voting shares. They are the people who make money. Among the top 10 shareholders of Google, Larry Page holds 5.94% of the shares, and Sergey Brin holds 5.77% of the shares. They own less than 12% of the shares, and Vanguard owns 5.31% of the shares. These three shareholders have 65% of the voting rights. They set up this new company to get back their voting rights, especially after they were kicked out of the company. The higher-ups will pay more attention to these things. After all, no one wants to be called in and left at the whim of others. Jiang Hai's 1% shares have voting rights. After all, it is cash. Although the voting rights are only about 3%, it is a symbol of status. Jiang Hai is currently the 11th largest shareholder of Google. This is not a joke. With this status, Jiang Hai can be considered one of the higher-ups in America. No matter how rich he was in the past, he was just a cattle farmer. But now, he is a high-ranking member of society. Sometimes, virtual assets such as reputation were not inferior to those of real businesses. Jiang Hai also understood this truth, but all the cash had been spent, leaving only this stack of paper. Jiang Hai's heart was still somewhat uncomfortable. This may be the thinking of a small farmer. The money in his hands was his own money. If he invested it, it would be someone else's money. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. Well, you've spent all your money. You can't just let it go when you don't see any profit. Hearing Jiang Hai's sigh, Azalina put her pretty face on Jiang Hai's shoulder, and then said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Yes, it's useless to think about it now. There will be a way when the car reaches the mountain. There will be a way when the boat reaches the bridge. It doesn't make sense to think about it now. Anyway, the money has been spent, but my heart hurts. Jiang Hai said helplessly while holding Azalina's hand. Hee, where does it hurt? I'll rub it for you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina's hand also touched Jiang Hai's chest, but then in her exclamation, Jiang Hai directly pulled her in front of him. Compared to rubbing my heart, I prefer you to rub other places. Looking at Azalina in front of him, who was only wearing a nightgown, Jiang Hai's hand shook, and the belt that was originally tied around her waist loosened. Under the moonlight, a perfect body appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Looking at the scene in front of him that was like a holy goddess, Jiang Hai said with a smile. I'm still on a mission now, let's not do it. Hearing Jiang Hai's face, Azalina didn't care about Jiang Hai's gaze. She just glanced at the second floor, and then whispered. Usually, when she said this, Jiang Hai would listen to her opinion, but today Jiang Hai shook his head. One hand stroked her waist, and the other hand had quietly climbed up some indescribable peak. What place will there be for you after we go back? I don't know why, but there are more and more women in the family recently, but you are still not one. Looking at Azalina in front of him, Jiang Hai also moved his face closer, sniffing the delicate fragrance on her neck, and said slowly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words and feeling his movements, Azalina also smiled helplessly. If you want it, then I'll give it to you. Haven't I always been yours? Holding Jiang Hai's hair, Azalina said softly. Hearing Azalina's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He turned over and pressed her down on the sofa under him, using a bath towel as a cushion. When their eyes met, Jiang Hai also kissed her heavily. Then, they undressed in other positions, which are inconvenient to describe in detail. But unknowingly, it was dawn. When Chi Jia and Alessera got up and saw the two people sleeping on the sofa on the first floor, they couldn't help but smile. They had long known that this day would come for Azalina and Jiang Hai. After that, Jiang Hai and the others stayed in Los Angeles for a while. They had to admit that it was nice to be able to enjoy the scenery of the South in winter. Although to be honest, there wasn't much fun in Los Angeles, it was nice to enjoy the warm sunshine and climate. Jiang Hai also often went to watch basketball games these days. California was a prosperous place for basketball teams. It was not a big state, but there were actually 4 basketball teams here: the Kings in the capital, Sacramento, the Warriors in San Francisco, and the Lakers and Warriors in Los Angeles. It could be said that there were also quite a lot of basketball fans in California. It might be second only to Cleveland, which had nothing but the NBA. That was where the real fans of basketball were. Jiang Hai and the others also enjoyed the beach and the scenery here these days. Jiang Hai even wondered why he didn't choose California when he was choosing his territory. Why did he go to the cold Boston? Jiang Hai really didn't know about this. Maybe it was because the land price in California was more expensive than the land price in Boston. However, Jiang Hai was now considered a rich man. Although he spent most of his money, at least the money for living was not a problem. If he wanted to come over in the future, he could come over again. At worst, he could just rent a house. However, not long after this idea came up, Qi Jie gave Jiang Hai a surprise. Just 2 days before Jiang Hai and the others were about to leave, Qi Jie mysteriously left one day. When she came back, she was holding a contract. On the contract it was written that she had bought the villa. Well, in the future, when Jiang Hai and the others were bored, they could come over for vacation. In any case, the money to buy a villa was nothing to this little rich woman. After hiring a renovation company to renovate and remodel the villa, Jiang Hai and the others rushed to book a commercial jet in mid-December and flew directly to Boston. They were preparing to go back for Christmas. Of course, in fact, there weren't many people who celebrated Christmas in Jiang Hai's house. As Alina and the other bodyguards were all from Ulan, and Ulan had inherited Soviet traditions. Christmas was on January 7th every year, not December 25th. Jiang Hai, Qi Jie, and Chia also didn't celebrate Christmas. The only people who celebrated Christmas were his employees, Aphrodite, and the others. Of course, Jiang Hai and the others going back to celebrate Christmas wasn't the main thing. The most important thing was to do the year-end summary. Whether it was a domestic unit or a foreign unit, the year-end summary and year-end bonuses were naturally indispensable. Jiang Hai and the others also received their bonuses on Christmas Eve. This year was naturally the same. Fortunately, Jiang Hai still had a lot of money left, so he didn't have to worry about not having enough to give bonuses to his employees. On December 14th, Jiang Hai and the others took a plane from the warm California to the cold Boston. When they got off the plane, they felt the bone-chilling wind, but this was the environment they were familiar with. Walking out of the airport, Jiang Hai and the others saw Robbins Garcia and Edward Anderson waiting outside in their cars for a long time. When they saw Jiang Hai and the others walk out of the waiting hall, they enthusiastically greeted them. Chapter 904. Hiss. I say, what are you doing? Jiang Hai opened his eyes in a daze. He felt that there was an indescribable feeling coming from some indescribable places. He lowered his head in confusion and looked at the 2 people who were moving up and down in certain places. Seeing that Jiang Hai got up, the original main force over there couldn't help but raise her head, gently stroke her hair, and chuckle at Jiang Hai. You haven't been back for many days, why don't you let me use you more? Looking at Jiang Hai, Feng Yunshan said with a smile. Hearing her words, Ai Xiaoxi, who was originally in charge of eggs on the other side, couldn't help but change her position and replace her. But didn't you go to bed after midnight last night? What time is it now? Oh my god, it's only 7 o'clock. Don't you guys have beauty sleep? Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai patted his forehead helplessly, then looked at her and said. We have been sleeping at home for the past few days. Now that you are finally back, otherwise we wouldn't have anything to play with. Patting Jiang Hai's stomach, Feng Yunshan said with a smile. Oh my god, you guys are really... Listening to her words, Jiang Hai rubbed his temples and said helplessly. At the same time, he felt his hand and found that there should be another person next to him, but she disappeared. Where is little Ya? After touching nothing, Jiang Hai asked Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi in front of him. Little Ye went downstairs to cook. Is it done? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but ask Ai Xiaoxi behind her. At the same time, her body also straddled Jiang Hai's body. Some parts that couldn't be described were also aimed at Jiang Hai's parts that couldn't be described. Okay, hurry up, I want it too. Seeing that Feng Yunshan was ready, Ai Xiaoxi also smiled and held something. As Feng Yunshan sat down, the war in the room began again. An hour later, Jiang Hai slowly walked out of the room in his pajamas. He shook his head and said helplessly, "Phew, luckily I'm not an ordinary person. Otherwise, I would have been squeezed dry. People are so strange. When there are no women, they want women. But sometimes, having too many women is a troublesome thing." Just like Jiang Hai, after he came back last night, he naturally did not relax. As the mistress of the house, Qi Jia had been with Jiang Hai for the past few days, so she naturally wouldn't miss out on food. However, Qia, Ai Xiaoxi, and Feng Yunshan all missed Jiang Hai very much, so Aphrodite and the others politely declined. After Jiang Hai came back yesterday, he had dinner at around 5 o'clock. Then, he stayed in his room and didn't come out until 1 o'clock in the middle of the night. In the end, after only 6 hours of sleep, the battle started again. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's physical fitness was there for all to see. Otherwise, he would have died long ago. "Yo, you woke up. I thought you would have to lie down for the whole day. Looks like they went easy on you." Seeing that Jiang Hai got up, Qi Jia also walked out of her room in her pajamas. She also just woke up. When she saw Jiang Hai's appearance, she couldn't help but walk over with a smile. She gently stroked Jiang Hai's vital part and said to Jiang Hai with a grin, "You don't know how strong my physical fitness is. Also, Robbins Garcia is coming over in a bit. Go back and put on your clothes." Jiang Hai glared at Qi Jia, then patted her butt and said to her, "It couldn't be helped." The pajamas that Qi Jia was wearing right now were actually better off not wearing them. Because they were really, translucent. He didn't know when and who started this trend, but the girls in Jiang Hai's room were wearing less and less clothes. It was mentioned before, but it was more or less covered up. Occasionally, they would be exposed, but it was just occasionally. But now, they were really not much different from not wearing anything. For example, the pajamas that Qi Jia was wearing now was a completely transparent silk robe, and she wasn't wearing anything inside. Those indescribable places were clearly visible under Jiang Hai's gaze. Most importantly, Qi Jia wasn't the only one dressed like this. Even Qia, who used to be the most conservative, was now dressed similarly. For example, Aphrodite and the others also wore this kind of material at home, but even so, they had to make it half sleeves or expose their navel. Wallace Shelley was even more outrageous. She directly wore her upper body naked at home, and then a pair of transparent high-waisted pants for her lower body. Some places were clearly visible, and her majestic upper body was even more unbearable. "Oh, I know. By the way, why did he come here?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jia curled her lips. Humans were creatures of habit. In the past, when she slept, she would wear very tight clothes because when she lived outside, she was afraid that there would be an accident or someone would suddenly look for her. But after coming to Jiang Hai's place, she might have been infected by Aphrodite and the others. Maybe she wanted to compete for favor, or maybe she just wanted to relax and be close to nature, so she was wearing less and less clothes. Usually, when they slept, these girls in Jiang Hai's room all slept in the first level. According to them, sleeping like this was comfortable, and Jiang Hai didn't care. They could sleep however they wanted, but it wasn't good to sleep like this when they woke up. Isn't it almost Christmas? We also have to prepare. After replying to Qi Jia, Jiang Hai also slowly walked downstairs. At this time, in the living room on the first floor, basically everyone was already awake. Every one of them was wearing very enchanting pajamas. They were either helping in the kitchen, watching TV, playing on the computer, or lying there watching fish. And the person watching fish was Tarak. At this time, she was pouting, staring at a big golden dragon in the fish tank. Who knows what she was thinking? Maybe she also liked to go back to nature. As the old saying goes, it's not easy to learn, but it's easy to learn bad things. Right now, she was also wearing pajamas like that. Well, actually, it wasn't really pajamas. Jiang Hai walked down and just happened to see a certain part of her body facing him. Looking at her, Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk over and smack her butt. Go back and put on your underwear. Looking at Taraga, who turned her head and wrinkled her nose because of the pain, Jiang Hai also snorted at her, and then said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, she didn't care. She skipped away and didn't go back to put on her underwear. Looking at the chattering in the living room, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh helplessly. His words seemed to be more and more useless at home. Among all the girls, the only ones who were still wearing normal clothes were his two nominal daughters, Evelyn and Marion. But their so-called normal was only in a sense. At this moment, the two of them were wearing a nightgown that wasn't transparent. However, that was all. There was nothing inside because the corners of the nightgown were squeezed out or from certain angles. Cough, Robbins Garcia and the others are coming in a while. Go back and put on your clothes. Looking at the completely out of control scene in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but cough lightly and say to them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls went upstairs reluctantly. They liked to show off, and they were willing to do so. Of course, they only liked to show it to Jiang Hai. As for others, they didn't even think about it. Seeing them go upstairs, Jiang Hai also went to the kitchen. At this time, in the kitchen, he had basically confirmed the people who would help here. Chia was naturally the head chef. In addition to her, there were also Aphrodite and Janice in charge of assisting. At the same time, there was also Jelena Waskia. Although this girl was usually cold, she was very interested in cooking. Seeing Jiang Hai come in, the girls glanced at him and then no longer cared about him. They were busy with their own work. You're up. I thought you would sleep for a while. Breakfast is almost ready. Seeing Jiang Hai walk over, Chia also smiled at Jiang Hai and said. Hearing Chia's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and walked behind her. From behind, he put his arms around her and put his chin on her shoulder. Looking at her making oatmeal, he gently sniffed the smell of her hair. To be honest, among these girls, Jiang Hai liked Chia and Ai Xiaoxi the most. Okay, don't worry. After you finish cooking, go upstairs and change your clothes. Robbins Garcia and the others will be here soon. After sniffing her hair, Jiang Hai said to Chia with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chia also blinked to show that she understood and sped up her speed. Not long after, breakfast was ready. After Chia and the others also changed their clothes, Jiang Hai and the others gathered around to eat. Of course, Little Yellow, Xiaobai, Dai Teeth, and Chirp had their own food. At about 9 o'clock, Jiang Hai and the others finished their breakfast. Not long after, Robbins Garcia came to Jiang Hai's villa with a cold wind. Seeing him, Jiang Hai directly let him in. Boss, it's still warm inside. As soon as he walked in and saw Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia said with a grin. Recently, his life has really been getting better and better. Sometimes, he thought that when Jiang Hai first came, he was a complete layman. At first, he was afraid that Jiang Hai would change this place into a holiday village or something like that. He even chatted with Jiang Hai and treated Jiang Hai to steak, hoping that Jiang Hai could raise his own cattle. Unknowingly, 3 years had passed just like that. Compared to 3 years ago, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was like heaven and earth. Whether it was money, people, or mentality, the current him was completely different from 3 years ago. Chapter 905. Greeting cards, colored lights, decorations, candy, dried fruit, toys. Phew, it wasn't so troublesome for Christmas a few years ago. Jiang Hai sat in the co-pilot seat of Robbins Garcia's F-750 and said with a frown. To be honest, he really didn't expect to buy so many things. He remembered that Christmas was just a Merry Christmas and a Christmas tree. That was a few years ago, there were only a few of us. By the way, boss, have you prepared the gifts for the ladies? Robbins Garcia couldn't help but laugh when he heard Jiang Hai's words. It's ready. I spent a lot of effort just to prepare these things. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai curled his lips and said with a serious face. Money, although he didn't have much money now, he still had the money to buy gifts. Moreover, these girls around him didn't want expensive bags, expensive watches and the like. They didn't lack these things themselves. They wanted more of the thought, and the thought was, to be honest, very troublesome. I really missed 2 years ago, when it was just a few of us men going to the forest to cut a piece of wood and bring it back as a Christmas tree, then we hunted a wild turkey for Christmas. Unlike now, we have to prepare so many things. My head hurts. Rubbing his temples, Jiang Hai said helplessly. He was used to being lazy. Although his brain was very good, it wasn't a big deal if he didn't use it. It was like a top-notch computer that had been left there to collect dust for 3 years. He didn't even know if it could be turned on again. He didn't know about other things, but the brain was better the more he used it. This is troublesome. Boss, it will be more troublesome when you have children. At this time, Philemon Turner, who was sitting in the back, also said with a smile. At present, there were many families in the manor, such as Philemon, the fisherman, Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, and Andrew Christian all had families. Having a family meant that they would spend Christmas together, so they needed to decorate their own home. Therefore, when Robbins Garcia and Philemon Turner came over, they brought with them requests from several families. Of course, there were also some people who were preparing to go home, such as the new cowboys and fishermen. The cowboys had been doing well recently. Because it was winter, there was snow everywhere, so what they had to do every day was to let the cows out for a short while, mainly to disperse the smell of the cowshed. After that, they would drive the cows back and continue to feed the grass. The fishermen, on the other hand, were catching large amounts of fish in preparation for their 11-day holiday. Jiang Hai's holiday would begin on December 25th, which was the exact date of Christmas, and would last until January 4th. However, just like last year and the year before, it was estimated that most of the people would not be able to rest for that long. The only ones who would be able to rest for a long time were Dulles Gerard and Connor Murphy, both of whom were extremely happy after making some achievements this year. This new year, they could also have a good new year. They wouldn't be as worried as they had been in the past. The rest of Robbins Garcia's family would stay in the manor. Philemon Turner's family would stay in the manor. Harris Fells had no family, so he would naturally stay in the manor. Belle Lester's home was in the town, so it wouldn't hinder him from running between the two places. Although Burke Dollar usually did not speak, he only had one daughter, Penelope Dollar. She might come to visit him this year, but he would also stay in the manor. The newly recruited cowboys, Gladstone Nelson, Blake Hill, and Edie Lewis, were determined to go home, but their homes were in the small town. After they went home, they could come back to visit during the day if they had nothing to do, so it did not matter. As for the fishermen, Edward Anderson's family was only Philemon Turner's family. They spent every year together, so naturally, they would not leave. Tommy Charles went back to his home last year, but it seemed that it was not very pleasant. In addition, his home was in the small town, so he would not leave this year. Eleanor Cece would not leave either. Andrew Christian was a Latin American, and his home was not here. If he really went home, it was unknown if he would come back, so he would definitely not leave. Marlon Rupert would also stay in the manor. It was said that this guy did not have any family members. The other rookies, Bill Zephaniah, Bennett Rodney, Bauer Rahman, and Carlisle Cotton, would all go home. As Jiang Hai's nominal bodyguard, Knerson Peters had no place to go, so naturally, he would also stay here and spend Christmas with his good brother, Harriman Fells. Therefore, in Jianghai's manor, many people would stay here for Christmas and New Year. Soon, Robbins Garcia drove the car and stopped in front of a shop. Jianghai looked up. It was not a shop in the town center that he was familiar with, but a shop in the outskirts of the town called Annie's Candy and Toy Shop. Seeing this shop, Jianghai frowned. He had never been to this shop before. "Well, are you here to buy candy?" Looking at the shop in front of him, Jianghai asked with some doubts. Hearing Jianghai's words, Robbins Garcia's face turned a little red, but Jianghai did not notice it. Hee, Robbins didn't come to this shop just to buy candy. Looking at Robbins Garcia's embarrassed look, Philemon Turner couldn't help saying with a smile. However, the moment he finished his words, Robbins Garcia glared at him. "Cough, the shop in the town center is too expensive. The things in this shop are cheaper than the ones in town." Hearing his words, Jianghai's expression became even more strange. "Expensive?" Jianghai gave Robbins Garcia a weekly salary of $2,500 a week, which was $130,000 a year. In addition to the share that Jianghai promised, it was 2,000. This year, Jianghai sold a total of 16,000 cows, with an average selling price of $160,000 a head, a total of $2.56 billion. They could get 2,000, a total of $5.12 million. Because the newcomers had only been here for 3 months, they did not participate in the dividend this time. It was just a formality. Jianghai would take $50,000 each, and Robbins Garcia, Burke Stroessler, Philemon Turner, Harriman Fells, and Bell Lester would split $5.12 million, a bonus of more than $1 million each. Now, he told Jianghai to buy candy cheap. Perhaps he also saw the meaning in Jianghai's eyes, so Robbins Garcia pretended not to see and got out of the car. Then, Jianghai and Philemon Turner also got out of the car, and the three of them walked into the shop in front of them one by one. As soon as they walked in, Jianghai felt like he had entered a kindergarten. This shop called Annie's Candy and Toy Shop was not small, about 200 square meters in size. Other than some cabinets for candy and toys, there was a large circle around it, which was actually a children's playground. Jianghai had seen Yao Yao many times in China before, and there were also ocean balls and slides that Jianghai had played when he was young. There was everything here. Many children played here, ranging from 5 to 6 years old to 2 or 3 years old. There were even many Wuxia children playing here, and many of their parents were accompanying them. Of course, almost everyone had something in their hands, whether it was food or toys. These things were actually very suitable for parents. It was not good for children to eat snacks, but which child did not eat snacks? Since they must eat, then they must eat something good. At least the snacks sold here were safe to eat. As for the toys, if the high-quality imitations in China were not counted, then the toys here were much cheaper than those in China. For example, a Meng Chi Chi. This thing could be bought online for at least 200 yuan. But it was basically sold for about $20 here, which was quite suitable. "Welcome, oh, it's you, Uncle. Mom, Uncle Robbins is here." Just as Jianghai was looking at the layout of the place, a girl in a cartoon costume came out to greet him. But halfway through her sentence, when she saw that it was Robbins Garcia, she showed an expression of, "It's you again," then shouted to the back. Hearing the girl's voice, it didn't take long for a woman of about 40 years old to walk out from behind. She looked very similar to the girl outside, but she was a Caucasian. Over 30 years old, she looked a little old. Her wrinkles were a bit heavy, but it was undeniable that this woman was still full of charm. When she saw Robbins Garcia coming over, a smile appeared on her face. Looking at the woman's smile and Robbins Garcia's slightly embarrassed look, Jianghai didn't need to say anything to know what the hell was going on. He looked at Philemon Turner and nodded with a smile. "Hey, Annie, this is Philemon, you've met him. This is my boss, Jianghai." Seeing the woman looking at him, Robbins Garcia seemed to not even know where to put his hands and said in a panic, "Hello, gentlemen, do you need anything? Since you're Robin's friend, I'll give you a 15% discount. Hearing Robin Garcia's introduction, Annie also said with a smile, then looked at Jiang Hai and the others seriously. Oh wow, it looks like it can be cheaper, but you have to mention Robin's name. Huh, okay, let's stop joking. We want to buy some things for Christmas. Jiang Hai glanced at Robin Garcia and said to the woman opposite him with a smile. Then he explained his purpose for coming here. It seems that Robin Garcia also has a spring. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.